The hall fell into a brief silence. After a moment, Belurga asked in an uncertain tone, "You say you want to go to war with Boffing Mountain for what?" Belurga's lineage originated from Boffing Mountain. As the legitimate heir, he had fallen to such a state. Every moment, he thought about the day he would fight back to Boffing Mountain and reclaim everything he had lost. But he also knew how difficult it would be. Even if only the reserves of Boffing Mountain were used, it would be enough to make any race vanish under artillery fire. Dong Jiayue picked up the dwarf specialty roasted tea and took a light sip. She said softly, "Boffing Mountain is pillaging the surrounding cities. We don't know the specific reason yet, but it will soon threaten the safety of our territory. Naturally, we cannot sit and wait for death. We must prepare for a fight with the enemy." Pillaging the surroundings? How is that possible? Rune wouldn't do such a foolish thing. Belurga stroked his beard and muttered in a low voice. "Whether he would or not is not for us to discuss. This time, Lord Fang Hao asked me to inquire how the engraving of the rifle blueprints is going." Dong Jiayue interrupted his thoughts. Actually, the reason why was simple. Transmigrators now represented a special significance. Boffing Mountain, following the suggestions of transmigrators, had developed bolt-action rifles directly from fire guns. This kind of generational leap would likely tempt any power. Now that the internal situation of the dwarves had stabilized, it wasn't strange that they wanted more transmigrators. "Oh, we have completely replicated one rifle, and the blueprints are being engraved," Belurga replied immediately. Replicating rifles and engraving blueprints. These were tasks Fang Hao had given them before leaving. Since they were going to war with the dwarves, they naturally couldn't be too far behind in terms of weaponry. Otherwise, even if they could win, the losses would be heavy. Therefore, Belurga's rifle blueprints became a very important step. Hearing that they hadn't been finished yet, Dong Jiayue's expression became somewhat serious. She felt the dwarves were too slow, but due to her status, she couldn't say much. She continued to ask, "So, how many more days will it take to complete?" Belurga calculated the time in his mind, 3 days. "It can be finished in 3 days." Dong Jiayue opened the Lord's book and informed Fang Hao of the news. After receiving a reply, she continued, "Good. I will come to pick you up in 3 days. I'll take you with me then. I need detailed maps of Boffing Mountain's cities and fortresses." Belurga nodded, "I can do that." After finishing the discussion, Dong Jiayue did not stay. Taking Black Sword, she mounted the bone dragon and flew into the sky, leaving the bloody mountains. Late at night, Boffing Mountain, Gray Iron City. The city was built against the mountain, occupying excellent defensive positions. The towering city wall was cast in iron gray. The city wall was a full 10 meters thick, topped with rows of defensive machinery. From the rear of the city came the sound of clinking and clanking. On a huge stone mountain, countless craftsmen were working through the night. They were carving a statue of the 7th king, Rune. Inside the royal palace, King Rune wore a gold-trimmed red robe and a crown on his head. His wine-red beard hung down to his knees. Sitting on the throne, he had a powerful aura, commanding respect without needing to be angry. Below, the high-ranking officials of Boffing Mountain stood, discussing the next plan. "Your Majesty, as of today, we have captured a total of 72 transmigrators. They have been recorded and registered. We have also harvested a large amount of resources from their territories." A dwarf in a brocade robe stepped forward and said loudly. Rune sat on the throne, his face showing no expression. After the dwarf finished reporting, he continued to ask, "Are there any people with special skills?" Just as he asked, another dwarf stood out from below. "Your Majesty, 7 of them possess skills in planting, construction, and healing. No special skills have been found in the other transmigrators yet. They have all been assigned to the armory for the production of machinery, searching for people with special skills to supplement the workforce." That was the purpose of the dwarves attacking the transmigrator cities. Through the suggestions of the transmigrators, the dwarves had produced bolt-action rifles. The dwarves were very surprised by the knowledge and abilities of the transmigrators. After resolving internal conflicts, Rune immediately ordered attacks on all surrounding transmigrator cities. Capturing transmigrators. People with special skills would be assigned work according to their skills. Those without useful skills would be sent directly to the machinery factories to continuously produce machinery for the dwarves. Transmigrators could produce weapons and machinery through the Lord's book much faster than the dwarves could manufacture and assemble them themselves. Making a rifle took 3 days, while making a cannon could take a month or more. But in the hands of transmigrators, as long as the materials met the standards, they could be produced in an instant. The dwarves' disadvantage was their small population. Their advantage was equally obvious: powerful firearms. If their firearms could develop rapidly, the dwarves would also welcome a new future under his rule. Therefore, Rune's first step after securing his throne was to capture transmigrators. Hearing the reports, Rune stroked his beard and laughed happily. "Ha, good. Send out the order to increase the pace of the offensive. Before winter arrives, integrate all the transmigrators in this area to prepare for next year's plans," Rune ordered loudly. "Yes, Your Majesty." Everyone below bowed in unison. Just as Rune was in a good mood and intended to end the temporary meeting, rapid, crisp footsteps came from the corridor to the side. Immediately after, a guard strode in and said loudly, "Your Majesty, the commander of the 3rd Battalion is back and says he has urgent matters to report." Rune frowned. To come in and report regardless of the occasion meant there must be something urgent. "Let him in." The guard withdrew, and then a dwarf in full armor strode in. After bowing, his face looked a bit pale as he said, "Your Majesty, the 300-man cavalry unit pursuing Dengbin. None of them have returned." "What? What do you mean they haven't returned?" Rune's expression became serious again. He had heard of Dengbin. Both sides had exchanged many items. But from what he knew, Dengbin's territory was not strong. With the dwarves' power, capturing the city should have been effortless. The commander below was already sweating, and he licked his dry lips before continuing. "Your Majesty, I immediately arranged for an investigation. In the woods to the east, near the barren battlefield, we found the bodies of the missing cavalry. Besides them, there were also human corpses and a large number of skeletons. So all 300 people are dead, is that it?" Rune's voice grew lower and deeper, conveying his hidden anger. It wasn't that dwarves couldn't die. Many had died in battle. But losing 300 cavalrymen while pursuing a fleeing transmigrated team was something Rune could not tolerate. This was unacceptable. The commander swallowed and continued. "We suspect they were rescued by the transmigrators to the east. Otherwise, with the strength of Dengbin's people, they could never have killed our cavalry. Not a single one of the 300 escaped back, which could indeed imply the enemy's strength." Rune's face remained gloomy, yet still showed little expression. He was silent for a moment. "In this matter, you led the troops poorly. You are stripped of your command. Leave." "Yes." The commander wiped his sweat and withdrew. Rune's gaze swept over everyone below again, and he continued, "Hathor, you will take over the 3rd Battalion. Arrange for scouts to investigate the news of the eastern city. I need detailed intelligence within 3 days." Hathor was a man with a red beard and short hair. He stepped forward and accepted the order loudly. "Yes, Your Majesty." Rune nodded. "All right, that's all for today. Speed up the offensive." "Yes, Your Majesty." Everyone left, and Rune also turned to walk toward the back. Overnight, dozens of cavalry scouts set out from Grey Iron City and galloped toward the east. "Wow! Whoa! Whoa-ho!" A few days later, Fang Hao and Jia and Loli stood under the towering city wall, letting out exclamations of surprise. After several days of travel, the team from Lysis City finally arrived at the power center of the 100 Cities Federation, Silverwing City. The grayish-white city wall was high and majestic, and its depth seemed endless. The stone bricks of the wall were joined smoothly and coated with grayish-white lime. On the wall, flags of the Federation and Silverwing City were planted, and patrolling soldiers looked down from time to time. One could faintly see rows of defensive machinery. Watchtowers towered into the clouds. Any approaching team could hardly escape the view of the watchtowers. Good grief, this really is an impregnable fortress. Not to mention anything else. Just the defenses seen before them could already be considered rock solid. Moreover, as the power center of the 100 cities, there must be hidden measures. It was impossible to put all defenses out in the open. Lord, the paperwork is finished. We can enter the city. A guard came over at this time. Good. Fang Hao got back into the carriage. The carriage entered the city gate directly. Fang Hao pulled open a gap in the curtain and looked out curiously. The smooth road was over 10 meters wide. Even when two carriages passed each other, there was no crowding. The road was paved with stone bricks, with sidewalks on both sides. And the residents here, seeing such a team enter, did not stop to watch the show. It was as if this was a very common occurrence. The carriage drove straight into a standalone post station, which had a large area of buildings. It could fully accommodate their stay. Stepping off the carriage, everyone began to unload the supplies. Rebecca also stepped down from a carriage and said softly, "My things are all lost." According to the agreement, upon reaching Silverwing City, half of the mercenaries' pay needs to be settled. You settle it. Okay. Do you have plans later? Do you want to have lunch together? Fang Hao smiled at her. Rebecca gave him a look, then winked charmingly. I have things to do and need to prepare. I'm visiting some friends here tonight. If you're bored, you can take Njia for a stroll. It's much livelier here than in Lysis City. Oh, all right then. Fang Hao felt it was a pity. The two stood aside chatting. Dimitrika led people to conduct a detailed inspection of the entire residence and arranged corresponding patrol work. Even here, it wasn't as safe as their own territory. Some things had to be prepared in advance to prevent possible dangers. When the inspection was over, everyone returned to their rooms. After lunch, Fang Hao took in Jia, a Sidi, and two guards out of the residence. They called a carriage by the roadside to head to a nearby commercial street. It wasn't easy to visit. They had to look around. After all, they had been traveling for nearly a month. The carriage entered the vicinity of the commercial street. It began to slow down. Outside was bustling, mixed with the sounds of peddling. By the time they reached the street side, it was hard for the carriage to move forward. So Fang Hao had the carriage stop, and the few of them strolled over. Walking forward, they soon entered the busy commercial street. Shops lined both sides of the road, and many vendors stood by the roadside selling their goods. Among them, Fang Hao also saw transmigrators selling small items they had made themselves. It seemed they had completely integrated into this world. As they walked, Njia's hands were already full of snacks. She stuffed them into Fang Hao's and Asidi's mouths as they walked. Although this street was prosperous, it wasn't much different from Lysis City. The types of shops weren't anything special either. They chatted and arrived at the center of the commercial street, beneath a 3-story building. The building's name was Xianming Tower. The name Xianming Tower was full of a strong Oriental flavor. Either it was opened by a transmigrator, or a transmigrator had helped name it. Most people going in and out were women and noble ladies. It seemed to be a place catering to women. Come on, let's go in and take a look. Fang Hao led the group inside and immediately saw a good-looking male shop assistant greeting the customers. When he saw Fang Hao and the others enter, the man was slightly stunned. Then he walked over with a smile. Customer, come and take a look. If there's anything you like, let me know. We're fellow transmigrators, so I'll give you a discount. The male assistant was very enthusiastic. He didn't even attend to the female customers nearby and just followed Fang Hao. Did you open the shop? How could I have that kind of ability? This was opened by Sisterly. My territory is gone, and it just so happened that Sisterly was hiring, so I came to help, the male assistant said casually. Sisterly, to be able to open such a large shop here, this Sisterly's ability is truly extraordinary. Since we've come here, we should help each other. Yes, you're right. The group slowly continued forward, and Jia and Asidi were already attracted by the items in the shop. The first floor sold cosmetics, lipstick, eyeshadow, face cream, and many things Fang Hao couldn't recognize. This Sisterly should be quite familiar with the production of these things. To be able to produce them after coming here is indeed quite impressive. Do you only sell cosmetics here? This first floor is for cosmetics, the second floor is for various women's clothing, and the third floor is for jade jewelry. Sisterly is very capable. Our Xianming Tower has basically taken over the business of all the women in this city. The male waiter moved a bit closer. You know, when there's money, there are many greedy wolves. Otherwise, Sisterly's business would be even bigger than it is now. That impressive? Isn't it? I'm telling you, Sister Lee is the business version of Fang Hao in my heart. You haven't seen Sister Lee negotiating with several big shots in the city. She's so badass, just like in the movies, the male waiter said with some excitement. Perhaps because she had helped him, plus her truly significant achievements, he had a sense of admiration for the Sister Lee he spoke of. Yes, that is indeed impressive. Hey, and Jia roughly pulled the male waiter, making him stumble, and asked, "What is this?" "Oh, this is essence, for skincare." "What about this?" "This is an eyeliner pencil, used to draw eyeliner." And Jia asked several questions in a row, and the waiter patiently answered them. He could see the hero's attributes. As soon as Fang Hao entered, he was accompanied by a blue and an orange hero, which undoubtedly represented that the person in front of him possessed terrifying strength. Therefore, even though the other party had many questions, he answered them patiently. Fang Hao watched in Jia keep asking questions. There were too many types, and he didn't know what to buy. He then said to the male waiter, "Do you have any sets?" "Yes, we have sets here that include foundation, eyebrow pencil, eyeshadow, a whole set of cosmetics." "Of course, the price is a bit more expensive," the male waiter said, taking out a wooden box the size of a lunchbox from a shelf nearby. The words "Flower Fairy Honey" were clearly written on the wooden box. When opened, it contained various cosmetics neatly arranged. "What if I don't know how to use them?" Fang Hao continued to ask. "You don't have to worry about that. As long as you come to the store to learn, we will teach you. And these are very simple. You can learn them in a short while," the male clerk explained with a smile. At the same time, he pointed to the side, where a female clerk was teaching a noblewoman how to use cosmetics. "How much?" the male clerk directly said. 3 gold per box." 3 gold. Good heavens, this box of cosmetics is enough to buy several slaves. But now that he was wealthy, he didn't mind this small amount of money. He started counting the number of people in his mind. Rebecca and Jia, Dong Jiayue, and the maids in the territory. As he counted, the number had already reached over 70, and it was still increasing. Seeing that Fang Hao was not speaking, the male clerk felt that he probably thought it was expensive. He then said, "At that time, I will give you a discount, and it can be a bit cheaper." Fang Hao was stunned. "Oh, thank you." Just this interruption made him forget how many people he had counted. Anyway, it wasn't 100 yet. "Okay, prepare 100 boxes for me." "What, 100 boxes?" The male clerk was startled. "Is this person here to stock up?" "Ah, what, not enough stock?" "Enough, enough. Please wait a moment. I will immediately have someone prepare them." There was no such thing as not enough stock. The male clerk wished he would buy all the stock in the store. At that time, he would also earn a lot of commission. After paying, he asked the clerk to deliver the items directly to the inn where he was staying, according to the address. Fang Hao then led his people and continued to walk towards the second floor. According to the male clerk, clothes were sold on the second floor. As soon as they reached the second floor, the atmosphere instantly became much quieter. Those who stayed were also some young women. From the number of people, the clothes here were also quite popular. However, the degree of popularity could not be compared with the cosmetics downstairs. Fang Hao came to the counter on one side and looked up to see the clothes hanging on the wall. There were separate tops and skirts, as well as one-piece dresses. However, the style was more similar to the ancient Chinese Hanfu style. There were a few pieces that were the type worn by the people here, and the clerk said they were not produced in-house. This was exactly the opposite of the clothing styles produced by his bone cloth art shop. The bone cloth art shop mainly focused on body shaping and fitting, but the styles were more modern or Western. The ethereal and flowing styles here were indeed beautiful, but it seemed that the people here had not yet accepted them. "You guys pick some too. I'll settle the bill when we leave," Fang Hao said. And Jia pulled a Surdy and went to the side to choose the clothes she liked. But she didn't dare to go too far, afraid that Fang Hao might encounter some danger. Fang Hao walked around, and his eyes fell on a light blue long dress embroidered with silver thread and auspicious clouds. The style was very beautiful, and the fabric was high-quality silk. It had the youthful spirit of a young girl, yet also the mature and graceful dignity. It was quite suitable for a woman like Rebecca, whose age was unclear. Boss has good taste. This dress is embroidered stitch by stitch. I've been to the factory, and I heard it takes several weeks to embroider one piece. Having just bought 100 boxes of flower fairy honey, the male clerk called him boss with great enthusiasm. Wrap it up. All right, they were all made of high-quality silk, which felt very comfortable to the touch and to wear. Fang Hao continued to browse forward, and the scene before him made him stunned. Doo-doo. Good heavens, they actually sold this kind of thing here. He looked around, and since he was already here, he chose a few more doo-doo and asked the clerk to pack them up. Please take care, boss. May you get rich, boss. Welcome to visit again, boss. The male clerk escorted him all the way to the door and said respectfully. What he earned from Fang Hao this time was enough to cover his total earnings for the past few months. He was so happy that his mouth was almost split to his ears, and he looked forward to this golden client coming back to spend money again. Okay, goodbye. Fang Hao nodded and continued to walk forward with the others. Xianming Tower was indeed the most unique shop on this street. The other jewelry stores and clothing stores were not as interesting. There was no novelty at all, and he had no intention of buying anything. He no longer had the idea of continuing to wander. Fang Hao and the others wanted to find a place to eat dinner and then return to their lodging. They walked slowly along the way, also observing the liveliness of the street. Just as they saw a good tavern, and Jia, who was beside him, exclaimed in surprise, "Hey, look quickly, that person has a bird standing on his shoulder." Fang Hao looked in the direction and Jia pointed. He saw a team of guards walking along the roadside. The man leading the way was tall, wearing black and gold trim armor, with a sword hanging at his waist and a longbow on his back. What made Jia exclaim was the green parrot, whose size was close to that of an owl, standing on his right shoulder. The market was noisy, but Jia's exclamation seemed to have been heard by the man across the street, who turned his gaze towards them. Fang Hao didn't want to cause trouble and immediately said, "Lord Commander, we have no ill intentions." This wasn't because he was afraid of the other party, but because it was a bit impolite to whisper about someone on the side. And it was even more awkward when the other party heard it. And Jia also explained, "I was just curious about your bird. I didn't mean anything else." The man was wearing black military armor, and the armor clanked as he walked. He carefully looked at Fang Hao and the others and asked in a low voice, "Just entered the city? Let me see your identity tokens. Get down, put down your weapons." As soon as the man spoke, the parrot on his shoulder shouted loudly. This sudden sharp sound startled Fang Hao and the others. The Lionheart Knights behind him almost drew their swords. "Shut up." The man shook his shoulder. The parrot on his shoulder flapped its wings for a while, then flew back to his shoulder and shouted, "Catch the thief! Catch the thief!" Ah, this. Fang Hao's group and the passers-by all looked at this parrot. However, the guards behind the man seemed accustomed to it and showed no change in expression. They just stepped forward and checked the entry tokens of Fang Hao and the others. When they saw that they were people from Lixis City attending the council, they did not make things difficult for them. Only Jia, with her usual familiarity, leaned over and stared at the parrot, saying, "Your bird, how does it look so unintelligent?" The man smiled awkwardly. "I bought it from the market. At that time, I thought it was quite intelligent and could mimic speech, but it always talks nonsense and its mouth never stops all day." After checking the entry tokens, they did not make things difficult for them. Fang Hao stood at the entrance of the tavern and politely said, "How about I treat you gentlemen to a meal?" "No, we still have to patrol the streets. Recently, there have been quite a few outsiders in the city. Since you have bought so many things, you should go back early tonight." "Okay, thank you." The man nodded again and continued to walk forward with his subordinates. Fang Hao and the others entered the tavern. They ordered a table full of dinner and started eating. After eating and drinking to their fill, the sky began to darken. He also looked at the wanted posters displayed in the tavern. There was nothing special, so he took everyone back to their lodging. The commercial street was still noisy. Numerous carriages gathered on the street, making it much more prosperous and lively than usual. In a luxurious private room of the largest restaurant in the city, Dragon Soaring Swallow Restaurant, bursts of laughter could be heard from time to time. The nobles from various cities who had arrived at Silverwing City were toasting each other in the restaurant, creating a lively atmosphere. This restaurant was originally called Dragon Tooth Tavern. 2 months ago, it was renovated and renamed Dragon Soaring Swallow Restaurant. In a private room on the third floor, Grot's butler held a wine glass and looked at the noisy street downstairs. The team from Lix's city entered the city in the morning. This matter is probably difficult to handle now. In the private room sat a middle-aged mercenary, dressed like a small merchant. The mercenary said, "No one expected it. Those people didn't drink that herbal tea at all. At that time, we could only retreat, and we were almost discovered by their scouts when we left." When the butler heard this, a surge of anger rose in his heart. He turned around and sat down, slamming the wine glass in his hand heavily on the table. "When I hired you, that's not what you said. Setting up a herbal tea stall to poison them. You said it with such seriousness, but in the end, people were killed, and it didn't delay their journey at all." The mercenary was hired by the butler. Ostensibly mercenaries, they also did some banditry. Attacking the Lix's city army was something that ordinary people would not dare to take on. Alas, there should have been someone in their team who discovered that the herbal tea was not right, which caused the army not to drink it, which led to, I don't want to hear this. My master severely reprimanded me. If your leader truly wants to get rid of his current status, he should show his true abilities, not just boast all day. Yes, I will tell the leader. The butler leaned back in his chair and continued. Lix's city has already entered the city, and the city guards have also started to set up defenses nearby. It is obviously not possible to capture Rebecca without anyone knowing. My master wants you to change your target first. Oh, please tell me, sir. The new lord of Lix's city is a puppet husband newly supported by Rebecca. Rebecca is difficult to deal with, so you can deal with him first. If her husband dies, Lix's city will have no lord, and the council will naturally have an excuse to force her to abdicate. At that time, my master will take this opportunity to make some arrangements. The mercenary slowly nodded and continued to ask, then what is the strength of this puppet lord, and what is the defensive strength around him? A young man in his 20s. His strength will definitely not be too high. He looks like a pretty boy and has gained Rebecca's favor. There should be some guards around him, but the number should not be large, the butler continued. Oh, in that case, there is no problem, sir. Please rest assured, the mercenary guaranteed. Capturing Rebecca alive in the city was indeed a bit difficult. But killing a pretty boy who was living off a woman was much easier. If you fail again this time, I will also have a hard time explaining to the master. Also, the master said that this kid should have heroes protecting him. Don't underestimate him just because he is a pretty boy. You must go all out. Understand, the butler solemnly instructed. The mercenary's expression changed. Heroes? What level of heroes? The master didn't say. You will have to investigate these yourself. Anyway, at that time, be sure to arrange more people for the operation. If the other party has 10 people, and you arrange 100, he still has a chance to escape. But if you arrange 10,000 people, you can tire him to death. The mercenary's eyes twitched. Sir, 10,000 people in the city, isn't that too exaggerated? That's what I mean. Don't let anything go wrong again. Also, be sure to do a good job of keeping it confidential. It is best if the identities of the people you arrange cannot be traced. Don't let the people from the hall find out anything at that time. Yes, we will handle it properly. The butler nodded slightly. He had said everything he needed to say. Whether it would succeed at that time was not something he could control. By the way, did you prepare the tiger penis I asked you to prepare last time? The mercenary immediately took out a wooden box from under the table. It's prepared, the tiger penis of the blue crystal tiger, and it still has the testicles. Okay, good. I'll take it with me later. Okay. The private room became quiet again. The two lowered their heads to eat and talked about unrelated matters. It was already night when they left the tavern. Fang Hao and Njia had some wine, but Asurti and the guards were still performing their duties. The group had eaten and drunk their fill, so they had no intention of continuing to wander. They walked out of the street along the way, called a carriage, and returned to their lodging. Upon returning to the residential area, the streets began to quiet down. They returned all the way to their lodging. Njia excitedly went upstairs with the items she bought to show off to Luoli. As for Fang Hao, he looked at the cosmetic sets and clothes he had bought. He walked up the stairs and went up. Just as he reached Rebecca's door, he saw the maid coming out of the room. Lord, City Lord. The maid bowed slightly. Okay, is Rebecca resting? Madam is about to rest, the maid continued. I went shopping today and bought some things for her. I'll bring them over to her. I'll inform Madam. The maid turned around and entered the room again. After a short while, the maid came back out. She smiled and said, Sir, Madam invites you in. Okay. Pushing open the door, Fang Hao walked straight in. In the room, the night-glowing stone was covered by a lampshade. The silver moonlight shone in from the window. Rebecca, wearing a bathrobe and with slightly messy hair, sat on the bed. What are you up to so late at night? Fang Hao placed the things he had bought today on the table. Seeing the items, a hint of surprise appeared on Rebecca's face. You bought something for me? Well, I passed by Xianming Tower today, so I bought some for you on the way. Humph, at least you have some conscience. That's right, I've been thinking of you wherever I go. When I saw this dress that suits you, of course I had to buy it for you. Fang Hao sat down beside her, his face thick. He still knew how to say things that women liked. Actually, some words depend on who says them and when. If Fang Hao had said something like this when he and Rebecca first met, Rebecca would definitely have felt disgusted and might even have had someone chop off his head. But now, hearing it, Rebecca's face just turned red, and she didn't have any extreme reactions. How did I not realize you were so good at coaxing people back then? Rebecca's face was flushed. The loose neckline hung down, revealing a corner of the white jade pendant between two rounded mounds. Actually, Rebecca had a habit of sleeping naked. When he first pretended to be a effeminate fashion designer, he had seen Rebecca sleeping naked. Hopefully, that good habit hasn't changed. That also depends on who it is. Why would I coax ordinary people? All right, I've accepted the gift. I have things to do tomorrow and need to rest early. Rebecca started to shoo him away. What are you going to do tomorrow? I'll have a SETI go with you. It'll be good to protect your safety if anything happens. Fang Hao didn't leave. Instead, he moved from the chair and sat down by the bed. He looked seriously at the beautiful woman with disheveled hair in front of him. Rebecca felt a little flustered under his gaze, pulling the quilt up to her chest and timidly scooting back. She had originally wanted to scold him a bit, but it seemed her words had no deterrent effect on him. She gritted her teeth, knowing that he wouldn't leave without some benefit. After thinking, she said, just one, and then go back and rest quickly. I really have something tomorrow. After speaking, she leaned forward and actively kissed Fang Hao on the lips. Their lips met. Just as Fang Hao was about to reach out and put his arms around her, Rebecca had already pulled back. All right, go back quickly. I need to rest. Fang Hao blinked, covered his lips, and said, Humph, I originally wanted to talk to you, but I didn't expect you to take advantage of me. I treated you like a sister, but you actually craved my body. Just you wait, I will definitely get revenge next time. Rebecca was full of confusion, looking at Fang Hao's expression like a wronged little woman, and glared fiercely. Are you sick? What do you mean crave my body? It was clearly you. But Fang Hao didn't listen at all, saying, just you wait, I will definitely come back for revenge. Then he turned and left the room. Back in his room, Anya had also returned after showing off her new clothes to Lola. When Lola was full of envy, Anya gave her the flower fairy honey that Fang Hao had bought, and she said very seriously that it was a gift from her to Lola, representing their friendship. That made the child extremely touched, although she didn't know how to use it. But at a price of 3 gold coins per box, she knew it was a good thing. She hugged Anya's leg, almost crying. Anya was also very happy, saying that she would take her to see the excitement next time. Inside the room, the night stones illuminated the space. Anya, wearing her new clothes, kept spinning around in the room. The clothes from Xianming Lu actually carried that ethereal aura. But when worn by Anya, they somehow lacked that feeling. But they still looked quite good. Ding! The Lord's book transmitted a private message sound. Opening it, it was a message from Dong Jiayue. Brother Hao, the dwarven scouts have started to scout frequently towards my side. I suspect the dwarves are about to make a move. Fang Hao sat by the bed and replied, How are the blueprints from Belgar? It's been so many days. It should have reached the time he mentioned, right? Belgar was responsible for engraving the rifle blueprints. But it had been over a month of research, and it still hadn't been engraved. The last time he had Dong Jiayue urge him, he said 3 days. Today was the 3rd day. Dong Jiayue replied, I just came back from Belgar. He said it will be finished tomorrow morning. I hope he doesn't change his mind this time. How are your preparations going? Do you have any intelligence from the dwarves? Dong Jiayue, Commander Blacksword has gathered 1,000,000 undead soldiers. I have integrated 12 lords to participate in this battle. These past 2 days, we have been making equipment and various artifacts for the skeletons and soldiers. Immediately after, the second paragraph came again. The dwarf population is limited, but that's only compared to humans and orcs. Besides the 8 mountain cities in the 8 Peaks Mountain, there are also 12 fortress cities below, all equipped with a large amount of defensive machinery. Therefore, this battle might last for a long time. War is costly and exhausting, especially with winter approaching. If it weren't for the dwarves' ambition, Dong Jiayue wouldn't have wanted to start a war at this time. After all, recruiting troops and traversers also required various soul crystals and other materials. Although she didn't know why Fang Hao could recruit so many undead, he definitely paid a corresponding price. Once they were used up, the security guarantee would also be reduced. It's all right, if the dwarves aren't afraid, what are we afraid of? The undead don't need to eat and aren't afraid of the cold. We can wear them down. Fang Hao replied. Hee hee, Brother Hao is right. I'm not afraid of them either. Fang Hao continued to reply. I can't rush back here. You be extra careful. I will arrange for heroes from various cities to support you. Dong Jiayue. Okay, we can handle this kind of thing. We can't have you personally handle everything. Fang Hao. When Belagar's blueprints are ready, give them to me immediately. Understood. After saying this, the two ended their chat. Fang Hao lay on the bed, took out the sound transmission conch again, and sent messages to the heroes in the surrounding areas. He asked them to consolidate their forces and head to the border of the desolate battlefield to assist Dong Jiayue in the attack. Anya went to find Lolo again. On the autumn night, it was peaceful outside the window. Rebecca lay on the bed, tossing and turning. She suddenly opened her eyes. That brat. She had been lying in bed for a while, but now she couldn't sleep at all. Her mind was full of Fang Hao. Unable to sleep, her gaze fell on the gift on the table beside her. She turned over and sat up, first opening the wooden box with Xian Meng Lu on it. The wooden box opened, and bottles and jars appeared before her eyes. Although it was the first time she had seen them, she knew clearly that these were cosmetics made by the Traversers. In Silverwing City, the products from Xian Meng Lu were very popular with women. She fiddled with them for a bit, then closed the wooden box again. She opened the package beside it again. In the package was a long dress with a blue background and silver threads. From the fabric and workmanship, she knew it was expensive. However, this was the first time she had seen the style of this long dress. It was different from the dresses she had worn before. The workmanship is good, and it looks pretty, but the style is a bit strange. Rebecca muttered to herself, picked up the long dress, and went to the bronze mirror to compare it. She liked blue, especially blue-gray. In her residence in Lysis City, blue decorations could be seen everywhere. Fang Hao remembered this because he had only made clothes for her. Looking at herself in the mirror, she nodded with satisfaction. She simply took off her nightgown and planned to try it on. The nightgown slipped to the floor, revealing her full and soft figure. Just as she unfolded the long dress, she saw a milky white, thin piece of fabric floating down. Rebecca's eyes were quick, and she grabbed it in her hand. What is this? She had originally thought it was a silk handkerchief or a piece of fabric for display. But this piece of fabric was much larger than a handkerchief, and the edges were neat, with a pattern of blue flowers printed on it. It was clearly not just a scrap of fabric. This was obviously also a piece of clothing. She compared it to her body and quickly understood the true purpose of this piece of fabric. She looked down at her chest, and her face instantly started to turn red. This was for binding the chest. Rebecca had elven blood. Although she could only be considered a half-elf, her beauty and figure were both outstanding. Especially her abundant assets in front of her chest. Perhaps even elves couldn't compare to her. After all, it was said that elves were good at using bows and arrows, and if it was too large, it would also affect drawing the bow, wouldn't it? What Rebecca was using now was a bra from the bone cloth shop. When practicing sword fighting, she would wrap another layer of white cloth to prevent herself from losing balance during activities. and the one in her hand was another type of bandeau. It was soft to the touch, and the workmanship was even more exquisite and beautiful. These traversers really have a lot of tricks. The bronze mirror was a bit small, so she adjusted the angle. She studied it herself and put the belly band on her body. Soon, the white belly band was on her body. She stood in front of the mirror and looked carefully. It fit well vertically, but horizontally, it seemed a bit narrow. It was okay to expose her back, but the sides only covered the main rounded parts, exposing two full semicircles on the sides. She pulled it slightly, trying to cover it, but when she pulled the left side, the right side would show more. If she pulled the right side, the left side would be exposed. So, she simply didn't move it and just covered the middle. She stood in front of the mirror and admired it for a long time. Wearing this made her feel a little embarrassed, but she didn't want to change out of it. She originally didn't like to wear clothes to sleep, so it was just right to wear it. She got into bed and crawled under the covers. She continued to let her mind wander. The next day, at noon, Rebecca began to prepare. She heard that she was going to visit someone from the Hall of Justice and had also prepared a gift. Fang Hao arranged for a Seti and several Lionheart Knights to accompany her to ensure her safety from the bandits. They also learned that the Marshall family was intentionally targeting Rebecca. Safety issues needed to be considered more comprehensively. After seeing Rebecca off, Fang Hao did not leave his residence. After lunch, Dong Jieyue traded over the dwarf bolt-action improved white steel rifle blueprint, blue. It was finally completed. A hint of joy also rose in Fang Hao's heart. The rifle he had been looking forward to for so long was finally engraved. This kind of rifle was what he needed, but its advantages and disadvantages were also very obvious. A bolt-action rifle required pulling the bolt after each shot, so its rate of fire was not faster than that of a bow and arrow. The power was also the same. In the Merchant Alliance's shop, he had seen a purple weapon bow. The description said it was made from ancient wood and beast sinew. In terms of rate of fire and power, it was much stronger than this type of rifle. But to draw this kind of bow, one needed arm strength that was not possessed by ordinary people. Modern people are afraid of guns, but in this world where one can become a hero and possess divine power, the firing method of the rifle also limited its power, and the advantage of the rifle was a constant damage. With a simple firing method, even ordinary farmers could instantly gain some combat effectiveness as long as they were equipped with rifles. It was especially suitable for the vast number of skeleton archers in Fang Hao's hands, whose rank was not very high. He traded the blueprints over. Fang Hao immediately called people to clear out an open space in the backyard. They built a simple large warehouse with wood and leather, blocking all sight from the surroundings. Fang Hao stood inside, opened the Lord's book, and began to make bolt-action rifles. Dwarf bolt-action improved white steel rifle, 2 tough wood, 2 fine iron, 3 white steel ingots, 52 metal parts, 35 precision parts. Description: a long-range firearm developed by the dwarves, with an improved loading method to compensate for the slow loading speed of the dwarf handgun team. Good heavens, it requires so many precision parts. It was fortunate that before leaving, he had obtained the blueprints for precision parts from the dwarves through Dangbin. Otherwise, even if the rifle blueprints were ready, he would not be able to mass-produce them. First, make enough precision parts. Then start making rifles. Set the production quantity to 10. Hundredfold increase triggered. Obtain 1,010 dwarf bolt-action improved white steel rifles. Whoosh. Large areas of light flickered, and bolt-action rifles appeared from all around, scattered on the ground. Because the space was limited and he was afraid of being seen by others, he could only make a small amount at a time. He traded these 1,010 to Dong Jieyue, and Fang Hao continued to make them. Another 1,010 were sent to Dong Jieyue. This was repeated over 100 times. A total of over 100,000 rifles were handed over to Dong Jieyue. Thank you, Brother Hao. What about the bullets? Fang Hao continued to make a large batch of bullets and handed them over to her. Fang Hao made as many bullets as possible, to avoid running out of bullets at a critical moment. The bullets were finished. Fang Hao continued to make first-generation field artillery. This kind of artillery was large and heavy, belonging to the earliest artillery equipment possessed by humans. The improved version now should be lighter and more convenient. Fang Hao made 101 artillery pieces. He handed them over to Dong Jieyue. Wow. Brother Hao, you have this too. Wow, amazing. Dong Jieyue expressed her surprise in text. Fang Hao replied, there are no shell blueprints, only 52 shells. You plan how to use them. He didn't have shell blueprints in hand. These 52 shells were still confiscated from the Deathbringer's stronghold. They were stored in the storage space of the Lord's book. Now he handed them all over to Dong Jieyue at once. However, Dong Jieyue didn't seem worried and said, that's okay. We've already discussed it. The dwarves are good at using firearms. As long as we break through a city, we can capture artillery and shells. Now with your artillery, it will be even simpler. Well, thinking about it that way seems right. Once the dwarves start a war, they will use firearms. As long as they win once, they can obtain the enemy's firearms, forming a situation where they can sustain the war through war. But the premise is that you can defeat the dwarves. All right, you all be careful. Try to capture as many dwarves as possible. Let Belgar persuade them. Population is also a resource now. Fang Hao added. Oh, okay. I remember. Dong Jieyue replied. The two ended their chat and went about their respective tasks. Fang Hao walked out of the temporary warehouse. He dismissed the soldiers guarding the surroundings. At this time, Anya, with Lola, ran over excitedly. Fang Hao, let's go. There's nothing to do this afternoon. I heard about a place that sounds interesting. Let me take you to check it out. Fang Hao walked back while saying, what kind of place? Something called Chinatown or something. The Karini Grand Theater. Ah, my dear. You may doubt the stars are fire. You may doubt the sun doth move. You may doubt truth to be a liar. But never doubt I love. On stage, the male actor held the female actor's hand, gazing deeply into her eyes, reciting his lines loudly. Below the stage, the seats were filled with young ladies and noble women. They were watching with great interest the theater's newly released play. The middle of the stands offered the best view. Rebecca and a similarly beautiful woman, Olivia, sat side by side, attentively watching the Grand Theater's latest production. Olivia was a deeply rooted noble in Silver Wing City. In her youth, she married Diarty, the leader of the Hall of Justice. Rebecca had known her since she was young. Over the years, Rebecca had been suppressed by various forces, although Olivia had not spoken up for her. Their close relationship and public appearances together were already a form of support. What? Cosmetics from the Immortal Dream Pavilion. I've never seen you use these things, Olivia asked softly. Rebecca's gaze remained on the stage. I heard the things from the Immortal Dream Pavilion are very... What? Not given to you by your little husband? Olivia tilted her head, looking at Rebecca's face. Her red lips were beautiful, and with simple eyeshadow, her already lovely face became even more stunning. Does it concern you? Rebecca rolled her eyes at her. See, I told you. Why would you pay attention to the Immortal Dream Pavilion yourself? He bought it for you, didn't he? Since you're using it, it seems you're quite fond of him. Olivia's face was filled with the joy of discovering something new. Rebecca didn't retort, only watching the performance on stage attentively. Olivia also didn't continue talking about these things, and the scene remained quiet for a long time. When the second act began, she continued, in recent years, the church hasn't been very active. They don't even bother with some cities being harassed by the undead, focusing all day on consolidating power. Don't be too stubborn. It's good enough if you can maintain your position. Olivia saying this now was clearly revealing information to her friend. If Rebecca didn't agree with the Federation's consolidation of power, her position might be in jeopardy. After all these years, her position had been shaky, seemingly in control, but actually very unstable. What did your husband say? Rebecca asked softly. Olivia didn't answer, and there was another moment of silence. When she spoke again, she had changed the subject. You know about the transmigrators, right? Many of the new plays in this theater are provided by them, and they're quite interesting. Rebecca nodded and didn't press further. Chinatown. Unable to resist the persistent pleading, Fang Hao took Jia, Luo Li, and even Demetrius out of their residence and came to Chinatown. This kind of iconic name, you know what it means as soon as you hear it. Chinatown was not as large as a commercial street, but it was exceptionally lively. Various snacks with oriental characteristics and some strange and wonderful objects could all be seen here. It occupied an entire street. There were quite a few transmigrators. Some developed their forces and built their own cities. There were also many who gave up their cities and brought their resources to live a stable life in the city. Everyone's opportunities were different, so their choices were naturally also different. In front of a barbecue stall, the owner was a tall, thin, middle-aged man with a Xinjiang hat on his head, but he spoke with a southern accent. The skewers were being grilled, and Fang Hao stood beside him and started chatting. Is business good? Can these people get used to barbecue? The owner flipped the skewers while saying, It's all right. There's always some gain when I set up the stall, so I can barely make a living. More than just making a living, you should be earning quite a bit. Forget it. I think you're the one who's amazing, brother. You have two heroes by your side. It seems your territory must be developing quite well, unlike us. We don't even have a city anymore, so we can only make a living by working from dawn till dusk. Fang Hao glanced at the heroes beside him and replied, Oh, I came with the city lord. These are his guards. The owner suddenly understood. Recently, a large number of outsiders had gathered in the city, all participating in the Federal Assembly. And Fang Hao should have come with his city lord. That's not bad either. In this world, as long as you can survive and eat your fill, that's enough. Don't think too much. And, by the way, big brother, I just arrived here and don't know much about this place. Which force is in charge of this city? Fang Hao continued to ask. The owner was startled, looked around warily, and saw that there was indeed no one nearby. Only then did he lower his voice and say, The distribution of power in Silver Wing City is relatively complex. The three most influential forces are 3. Fang Hao heard Rebecca say there were only the Hall of Justice and the Church of Light. Why was there a third one now? The Hall of Justice, the Church, and the Mage Association. The owner adjusted his small round hat and said, Mages? Are there mages in this city? Fang Hao was even more curious. Of course there are. I heard this Mage Association has a lot of say and is also the magic regulatory body, overseeing all mages. Anyway, just don't provoke them. The owner continued to explain. The path of a mage was even more difficult to walk. Every mage was a scholar, needing to read a large amount of information and literature and diligently study magic. Similarly, a mage's skills possessed strong destructive power. 2 warriors fighting might destroy a tavern. If 2 mages fought, not only would the tavern be gone, but the fire might burn for 3 days and 3 nights. This was also why mages needed special supervision. Oh, why would I provoke them? Fang Hao smiled, indicating that he was just asking. The owner nodded and continued to introduce. The Hall of Justice is the governing force of this city. We can set up stalls and live in the city thanks to the Hall of Justice. When mentioning the Hall of Justice, a slight smile appeared on the owner's face, indicating that his impression was still good. As for the church, the owner's expression immediately changed, and he looked around again. You should also know about the church. They have temples and shrines in every city. Their ideology is quite extreme. At first, they even considered us heretics and almost purged us in the name of some god. It was the people from the Hall of Justice who stopped them and didn't give them a chance. So the ones you should stay away from the most are them. Don't even go to the temple if you're sick. Otherwise, if you say something wrong, they'll accuse you of a crime and burn you alive, the owner said solemnly. It could be heard that besides caution, the owner also felt some disgust towards the church. The church's actions were somewhat polarized. They built temples and treated the injuries of ordinary residents, but their actions were also quite extreme. Fang Hao nodded to show he understood, then brought up a new topic. Oh, right. I went to the Immortal Dream Pavilion a few days ago. I heard that the owner, Sister Lee, is very capable. Oh dear, Sister Lee is more than just capable. Do you see the street? Sister Lee negotiated it. Otherwise, do you think these natives would let us set up stalls? Fang Hao glanced at the bustling street. Really? Of course. The owner sprinkled some seasoning on the skewers. All right, these are yours. Do you want beer? We have beer here too. And Jia and Luo Li happily ran over, took the skewers, and shared them. No drinking, I came by carriage. Next time, Fang Hao said with a smile, then turned and left with the others. The owner waved his hand. Don't ride a horse after drinking. Good habit. Fang Hao also waved his hand and walked towards the distance. Approaching dusk, Fang Hao and the others got into the carriage and started returning to their residence. On the way, they had the carriage detour to take a look at the Mage Association. However, at this time, the main gate was closed, so they couldn't visit inside. Instead, they bought some books about magic knowledge at the entrance. One of them was about lightning magic. The carriage returned to the residence, and Jia and Luo Li went to tinker with the items they bought. Fang Hao returned to his room and began to examine the magic books he had purchased. He had experience learning the fire serpent skill from books. He had also mastered many obscure and difficult-to-understand magic terms. Even more complex and rare symbols and terms could be translated and interpreted by referring to the materials on the side. Finally, after scanning the first few books, Fang Hao's gaze fell on the last one, Eye of the Lightning Spirit. Phew, finally the last book. I hope this one can help me comprehend magic, even if it's useless. He prayed in his heart, then opened the book. Just by looking at the first line, his expression immediately became serious. He started flipping through the pages one by one. After reading the theoretical knowledge at the beginning, which he understood vaguely, he saw the recorded spell further back. Lightning Spirit, a summoning skill for an air magic spell. It was similar to the Wood Servant Spirit he currently possessed, but its function was different. The Wood Servant Spirit's function was combat, or rather, protecting the caster. According to the book, the function of the Lightning Spirit was reconnaissance. A joyful expression appeared on Fang Hao's face. It's perfect for replacing the skeleton gray sparrow. Other places were fine. This silver-winged city was under the nose of the church. In the city guard, one could see church members assisting in patrols. If he continued to use the skeleton gray sparrow, there would be a certain danger, and being discovered would be a very troublesome matter. Using the lightning spirit in the future would be much easier to explain. Even if something was discovered, it wouldn't reach the point of being irreconcilable. Indeed, knowledge is power. Fang Hao scanned the books again from the beginning, starting to digest the knowledge in his mind. It should be because he had absorbed the godhead of the Lord of Thunder that he had a natural understanding of lightning magic. He recalled the knowledge he had just learned. He began to condense the power of magic according to the method. Feeling the power gather little by little, the magic gradually took shape. Gradually, in front of him, stood an owl formed by silver electric arcs. It really succeeded. Fang Hao was overjoyed. He immediately wanted to cast the next ability, Shared Vision. But suddenly, with a snap, the already unstable lightning spirit owl turned into streaks of electric arcs, scattering in all directions. What's going on? Fang Hao's smile instantly vanished. His skill had clearly been cast, so why was it so unstable? He reopened the book and began to check where he had gone wrong. 2 hours. Fang Hao was in the room, repeatedly checking the magic book. There were indeed many things he didn't quite understand, which needed to be read in conjunction with other books. Finding the reason for the lightning spirit's dissipation would likely require some effort. At this moment, the sound of a carriage came from outside the window. His room had a good view. From the room, he could clearly see the gate and the courtyard. He glanced down and saw Rebecca's carriage driving back. Soon after, there was a knock on the door. Enter. It was Rebecca's maid. After a slight bow, the maid said, Lord City Lord, Madam said to prepare yourself. You will be attending a banquet tonight. Banquet. Fang Hao rubbed his stomach. He had eaten quite a bit in Chinatown today, and he probably wouldn't be able to eat much more now. The maid continued, Yes, Madam Olivia is holding a private banquet, and she specifically requested to invite you. To see me? Who is this madam? Olivia is the wife of the leader of the Hall of Justice, Diarty. When the old city lord was here, he had a very good relationship with Madam. The maid continued to explain. Oh, all right, I understand. With that explanation, Fang Hao understood. Rebecca and this Olivia were best friends, and this time she brought her husband along. Naturally, they had to meet. When they came, Rebecca had said that some noble banquets could be ignored and were not necessary. But this invitation from her best friend, Rebecca, must have been unable to refuse. So she planned to take Fang Hao with her. Okay, I'll get ready. I'll go with you then. The maid smiled slightly. Sir, Madam asked us to help you. After speaking, she moved aside, and two more maids entered from behind. They began to prepare Fang Hao's clothes for the banquet. When he came out, Fang Hao had prepared several sets of formal wear for himself. After taking them out, the maids helped Fang Hao put on the somewhat form-fitting noble attire. In his territory, he had also had and the others help him put on clothes, but being touched by these maids still made him feel a bit embarrassed. After getting dressed, Fang Hao followed the others downstairs. In the first-floor hall, he saw Rebecca, who was already ready. She was wearing a dark green, form-fitting long dress with gold patterns, outlining her graceful figure with exquisite lines. Under the tight-fitting, hip-hugging skirt, her sexy long legs were covered by a pair of black stockings. The sheen of the black silk was very beautiful, with a faint shimmering pearlescent layer on the black surface. Nightfall. Fang Hao recognized these stockings at a glance. They were the Nightfall produced by the Bone Fabric Shop. Coupled with her fair, dewy skin and a pair of beautiful eyes full of affection, it made Fang Hao couldn't help but look at her a few more times. Elegant and noble, exquisite and lovely. Rebecca was still that Rebecca, the charming and yet untouchable city lord's wife. At this moment, she also noticed Fang Hao's gaze, glared at him, and said, "Why is your gaze so strange?" Fang Hao smiled slightly. "You look really good today." Fang Hao and Rebecca boarded the carriage. A group of escorts protected the carriage as it began heading toward the location of the wine party. Inside the carriage, the nightstone emitted a soft glow. Though they were close enough to touch, Fang Hao's gaze remained fixed on Rebecca. The long dress was custom-made. It fit her perfectly without a single wrinkle, outlining her curves flawlessly. The gold-threaded embroidery added a sense of nobility and elegance, especially her slender legs clad in night blue stockings, which were smooth and glossy. Sensing Fang Hao's gaze, Rebecca was no longer as shy as before. She smiled and said, "This outfit is great. The craftsmanship at your fabric shop is truly impressive. As long as you are satisfied, boss." Rebecca rolled her eyes at him and continued, "If you opened a shop in the city selling these kinds of gowns, they would definitely be more popular than Xianmeng Tower's clothing." Fang Hao nodded. "MHM. Tonight, you must promote our products to those noble ladies. I don't have much interaction with those people." "It's fine. There's no hurry regarding the shop." Fang Hao didn't mind. The carriage continued to move forward. Rebecca spoke again, saying softly, "Your identity is the owner of the Bone Fabric Shop, and also a registered mercenary group leader in Lixus City, commanding over 1,000 people. We met while capturing the Faceless Ones and ended up together." "Oh, understood." He knew that Rebecca was establishing his identity for him. Fang Hao's true strength was far greater than this, but some things couldn't be revealed. Moreover, their stories needed to be consistent. "Olivia and I have known each other since we were young. Our relationship has always been very good, and even now, whenever I come here, she is the only person I truly want to see. If she says anything bothersome later, don't take it to heart," Rebecca continued. "So, your only good friend is very concerned about your marriage, huh?" I wouldn't say concerned. It's just that when you get married, everyone has to meet the spouse, right?" Fang Hao thought for a moment and tentatively asked, "So, she doesn't know that you don't like men?" Rebecca furrowed her delicate brows and looked at him in confusion. "She shouldn't know? What are you implying?" Fang Hao blinked. "Oh, I get it. You didn't tell her because you want to take advantage of the opportunity to openly flirt with her." Surprise, shock, and confusion appeared in Rebecca's eyes. She couldn't understand how the topic had suddenly taken such a turn. And he actually said something like that. She opened her mouth, and her expression immediately darkened. She wanted to reach out and tear his mouth off, but unfortunately, both of their outfits were quite form-fitting. She simply lifted her foot and stomped hard on Fang Hao. She said angrily and shamefully, "Are you sick?" The venue for the wine party was a manor located in the central district. After the carriage drove onto the main road, other carriages could be seen heading toward the manor one after another. There were likely other nobles who had received invitations. But these people's carriages only had one or two escorts at most. Unlike Fang Hao's side, where a CD led more than 20 riders following them. The patrolling guards on the roadside had intercepted them twice already. Arriving at the manor. After presenting the invitation, the escorts remained at the entrance of the manor. Rebecca linked arms with Fang Hao and strode into the manor. This manor covered a vast area and was lavishly decorated. The courtyard was still lush and green, the original flowers having been replaced with vegetation that thrives in autumn. After being pruned and maintained by the gardener, it gave off a feeling of vibrant life. These plants were all forced to grow by wood element mages. They won't last long, and they cost a lot of money. Rebecca tugged Fang Hao and introduced the flower beds before them. Fang Hao was also quite surprised. Mages held a high status in any faction. They didn't do manual labor and needed special protection during combat. Yet here, they relied on mages to maintain the manor. It was simply outrageous. Those mages actually do that? Aren't mages supposed to be very arrogant? Fang Hao asked softly while casually wrapping his arm around the beauty's waist. Rebecca squirmed slightly and replied, "She is Doherty's wife, so the mages naturally wouldn't complain." "Are you hinting at someone? The weeds in my backyard are taller than a person, and I don't need mages to force their growth." "Oomph, fine, you're amazing." The two walked and bickered, passing through the manor. Entering the building, the interior was even more magnificent. Soft carpets covered the entire corridor. The white marble walls were pristine and bright, adorned with gold and silver carvings between the white stones, and pale blue gauze curtains swayed gently in the breeze. The entire atmosphere of the building was one of nobility and elegance. The banquet hall was brightly lit, and soothing music echoed softly throughout the hall. Magnates and noble ladies, dressed lavishly, were holding wine glasses and chatting merrily together. The two entering arm in arm naturally drew the attention of most people. But strangely, after everyone glanced back and forth at Rebecca a few times, they immediately turned their heads back to continue chatting with their companions. Not a single person even nodded in greeting. "It seems your popularity isn't very good," Fang Hao whispered. Rebecca's expression remained unchanged. "Don't pay attention to them." The two sat down in front of a sofa. While listening to the music, Rebecca quietly introduced the influential figures present. There were old-line nobles and famous merchants from the city. Although it wasn't a formal wine party, Olivia had still managed to invite many prominent figures from the city under her personal name. Since it wasn't a large-scale wine party, it didn't drag on for long. Olivia soon emerged, surrounded by several middle-aged noble ladies. She first gave a short public speech, then came down to chat enthusiastically with some of the nobles. Before long, Olivia led the noble ladies and walked toward them with a smile. Olivia was actually quite beautiful, with a dignified demeanor. She wore a pale purple long dress and a necklace with an emerald gem around her neck. Unlike Rebecca, Olivia's beauty was mature and intellectual, still charming, but even with good maintenance, she looked close to 40 years old. Rebecca, however, possessed a beauty where her age was indiscernible, combining liveliness and softness. The other noble ladies were significantly less attractive than the two of them. Although they were covered in jewels and finery, their appearance and temperament were simply not on the same level. "Rebecca, is this your husband?" Olivia walked over, her eyes full of curiosity as she sized up the young man in front of her. As she looked him over, she nodded, seemingly satisfied. It was like the expression of a girlfriend's mother meeting her daughter's boyfriend for the first time. Cough, cough. Rebecca lightly coughed twice and said, "Olivia, this is Fang Hao." Then, turning to Fang Hao, she said, "This is Olivia." There were 5 women in total. Rebecca only spoke to Olivia, completely ignoring the rest of the women. The other women acted as if they hadn't noticed, maintaining their original smiles. They were all sizing up Fang Hao. Fang Hao stood up and performed a greeting ritual. "Fang Hao, it is an honor to meet Madame Olivia and all you beautiful ladies." Olivia immediately returned the gesture and replied, "It's a pleasure to meet you too, Mr. Fang Hao." Olivia already knew Fang Hao's identity beforehand. However, the other noble ladies beside her looked him over again several times. Before, They had only felt that the man next to Rebecca had very good looks and temperament. But because he looked quite young, even younger than their own children, they hadn't considered him in that context. But upon seeing Olivia's reaction, coupled with the recent rumors about Rebecca replacing her husband, they immediately realized what was going on. In fact, things were quite open here. It wasn't strange for a woman to marry a younger husband. It was just uncommon. Olivia sat down next to Fang Hao. Mr. Fang Hao, are you a transmigrator? Fang Hao sat up straight. Yes, my city is near Lix's city. Another noble lady spoke up and asked, a transmigrator? How strong is your city, and what industries do you have? Fang Hao changed tack and replied, the city is developing quite well, with a few thousand troops. I opened a fabric shop, and the clothing business is decent. Another woman pressed, what is the scale? How does it compare to Xianming Tower? Fang Hao smiled again, like a machine programmed to answer every question. As for clothing, the business is slightly better than Xianming Tower's. Really? Better than Xianming Tower? The noble ladies looked skeptical. Fang Hao nodded. The clothing we produce is indeed more popular than Xianming Tower's. What Rebecca is wearing now was produced and made by us. As soon as he said this, their gazes fell back onto Rebecca. When they first arrived, they had already noticed Rebecca's gown and the stockings covering her legs. The noble ladies present were undoubtedly wearing and carrying expensive, even extremely precious, clothing and jewelry. But the gown Rebecca wore was much bolder. It perfectly displayed the feminine figure's curves. She was undoubtedly the most eye-catching person at this banquet. Not just these noble ladies, but the men in the hall were also intentionally or unintentionally glancing at Rebecca. Rebecca, stand up and let us see, Olivia said, holding Rebecca's hand with one hand. Rebecca didn't refuse, stood up, and turned around once in front of them. Isn't this a bit too bold? The fabric feels really nice to the touch. The craftsmanship is good too. How is this glossiness achieved? The noble ladies, who had originally just accompanied Olivia, began gathering around Rebecca and chatting. Rebecca answered softly and introduced matters concerning the bone fabric shop. Instantly, a layer of closeness was established between them. Olivia was also very intrigued by this type of gown that primarily outlined the figure. But what she was more curious about was the man beside her, who was clearly around the same age as her son. How did you and Rebecca meet? Olivia shifted to the side, moving closer to Fang Hao. At the time, I was establishing a mercenary group in Lix's city. We worked together to suppress the faceless ones, and that's how we got acquainted. Fang Hao continued to answer. Olivia nodded. This is the first time I've seen Rebecca admire a man so much. You must treat her well. Fang Hao shrugged. She's the one in charge. You should tell her to treat me well. Olivia chuckled, finding the young man's words rather amusing. After chatting with Fang Hao for a while, Olivia pulled Rebecca along. Come on, let's go to a room so we can try on your gown too. Rebecca was a little worried about Fang Hao, but she was still dragged by the group of noble ladies to a room on the second floor. Aside from Olivia, Rebecca became the second person to receive attention from the noble ladies. With Rebecca gone, Fang Hao was left alone. None of the noble magnates were willing to chat with him. All the surrounding seats were occupied. Only he was sitting alone, monopolizing an entire sofa. Sitting there like that was somewhat awkward. Putting down the wine glass in his hand, Fang Hao walked straight to the window. A breeze blew in through the window, providing a bit of coolness. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, approaching footsteps came from behind. He glanced slightly sideways and saw a tall woman with shoulder-length short hair walking toward him. She wore a wine-red gown and exuded the aura of an astute, successful businesswoman. Judging by her characteristics, she was a transmigrator. He just didn't know if she had entered on her own merit or, like Fang Hao, was attending the wine party relying on connections with nobility. The woman walked directly to the window and stopped beside Fang Hao. Mr. Fang Hao, the woman asked tentatively. You know me? The woman smiled. Hello, Master Fang Hao. Allow me to introduce myself. Li Rong. She finished speaking and extended her hand. Fang Hao shook her hand, having also guessed her identity. Sister Li of Xianming Tower, a woman very formidable in business. Relying on her identity as a transmigrator, she founded Xianming Tower in the city and was close to dominating the entire city's noble ladies' market. So it's sisterly. I've heard much about you. This surprised Li Rong somewhat. Fang Hao's identity wasn't hard to guess. One only needed to find out that the woman beside him was the city lord's wife of Lix's city to confirm the man was Fang Hao. But she hadn't expected Fang Hao to react so quickly, and guess who she was immediately. Master Fang Hao is joking. I'm far from having a great reputation compared to you. Li Rong waved her hand slightly. As long as one can survive, reputation isn't important. Fang Hao leaned on the windowsill, still gazing outward. Indeed, Li Rong agreed. The two chatted about Xianming Tower and cosmetics. Li Rong had previously worked in the cosmetics industry, developing products herself and owning factories that produced finished goods. After arriving here and interacting with the noble ladies of Silverwing City, she began redeveloping and manufacturing cosmetics. Naturally, the products weren't as good as modern ones, but the materials used were more environmentally friendly, all extracted from plants. Fang Hao nodded upon hearing this. In fact, luck was very important when transmigrating. Currently, Li Rong was doing quite well in Silverwing City. But try having her territory spawn in the orc territory. No matter how good you were at making cosmetics, it wouldn't matter. The orcs would have cooked you long ago. Since the two weren't very familiar, the conversation fell into a brief lull after a couple of exchanges. Li Rong reached her hand into the low neckline of her dress, and under Fang Hao's surprised gaze. She pulled out a small box, opened the lid, and with a light flick, 2 cigarettes popped out. The cigarettes were crudely rolled and lacked filters. She likely made them herself. Li Rong naturally offered one to Fang Hao, but he shook his head slightly and didn't take it. Li Rong then took out a lighter and lit one for herself. After taking a deep drag, she slowly exhaled a plume of pink smoke. After taking a couple of puffs, Li Rong continued, Master Fang Hao, are you interested in exploration? Fang Hao nodded. Sort of. What? Li Rong said. Coincidentally, I recently obtained a map. Based on my current strength, exploring it would likely be dangerous. I wonder if Master Fang Hao would be interested in exploring it together and splitting the spoils. Do you have any intel? There isn't much information right now, only that the enemies are dark creatures. Dark creatures? This piqued Fang Hao's interest. If Li Rong said she obtained a map, it should be a map near Silverwing City, certainly not too far. But Silverwing City is the base of the Church of Light. It gathers the church's top experts. How could there be dark creatures nearby? Fang Hao continued to ask. Near Silverwing City? Li Rong nodded. There's a pond on the east side of Silverwing City. Dive down along the pond, and you'll see an underground palace. That's what I'm talking about. She was very detailed, mentioning all the identifiable locations. If the information was true, Fang Hao could arrange for someone to find this pond on the east side, and thus find the underground palace she spoke of. You're being so detailed, aren't you afraid I'll go by myself? Fang Hao turned around and leaned against the wall. I believe you. Master Fang Hao, the #1 boss in the channel, wouldn't do such a thing. And even if you did go by yourself, I wouldn't have anything to say. After all, I can't conquer that underground palace myself, Li Rong said calmly. In fact, she had helped many people in Silverwing City, and she was also influenced by Fang Hao. She still clearly remembered. On the 20th day after transmigrators arrived, the Demon Rat's Invasion mandatory quest, Fang Hao sold a large quantity of equipment at a fair price in the channel. And that line, help each other and survive together. Her territory also relied on Fang Hao's equipment to persist until now, gradually developing its own specialties. If it weren't for the items Fang Hao provided, she would have to spend more effort on supplementing equipment and various materials, and Xianming Tower would not be open now. Therefore, she didn't believe Fang Hao would listen to her information and then abandon her. Fang Hao naturally didn't know Li Rong's thoughts, but he was somewhat surprised by the courage of this woman, Li Rong. No wonder she could establish herself in Silverwing City, and the transmigrators in the city all called her sisterly. Since they are dark creatures, haven't you considered the church? Fang Hao continued to ask. Heh, Li Rong sneered. I'm afraid that if I walk out of the underground palace, they'll find some random excuse to tie me to a gallows and burn me to ashes. Is the church that terrifying? That depends on who you are and how they treat you. Fang Hao nodded, feeling that it made sense. Do you have any information on the rank and number of monsters in the underground palace? No, I also obtained the map and information by chance. How about it? Want to give it a try? Li Rong also turned around and looked at him again. Fang Hao didn't continue to ask. Instead, he fell silent, thinking about whether to trust Li Rong and whether to explore this underground palace. He shouldn't have anything to do before the Federation Council meeting. How far is it from Silverwing City? It will take at least until the second day to arrive. It's still some distance from here. All right, then we'll depart tomorrow. Seeing Fang Hao agree, Li Rong also smiled. She softly said, tomorrow won't work. Tomorrow I have negotiations with a few gang leaders. How about the day after tomorrow? Okay, let's add each other as friends, and we'll contact each other via the Lord's book then. All right, Li Rong immediately put out her cigarette, took out her Lord's book, and sent a friend request. Fang Hao did the same, and after they became friends, Li Rong's smile became even more radiant. While they were chatting, the entire banquet hall suddenly fell silent. Olivia, dressed in a gorgeous purple long dress, slowly descended from the second floor, accompanied by Rebecca and several noble women. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, one could see. Olivia also wore a pair of night orchid silk stockings on her legs. And Rebecca, beneath her long dress, revealed her fair and rounded calves. It seemed Rebecca had given the silk stockings to her. But it wasn't a loss for Rebecca either. After all, Olivia was also quite attractive, the mature and voluptuous type. It was quite a feast for the eyes. As soon as Olivia appeared, everyone's gaze was drawn to her. After all, the purpose of these nobles and merchants coming here was not just for this meal. After Olivia briefly said a few more words, she announced the start of the banquet. Actually, when he came over, he really didn't feel hungry. But now he actually felt a pang of hunger. Everyone began to take their seats, and the maids brought out platters of food. Rebecca stayed by Olivia's side, occasionally glancing over here. Fang Hao, on the other hand, ate and chatted with the newly acquainted Li Rong. Mainly, besides Li Rong, no one else was very willing to talk to him. If he didn't speak, it would be a bit awkward. He could only find some topics to chat about casually. After dinner, night had fallen. The music in the hall started playing again, and men and women began to walk hand in hand into the center. Following the music, they began to dance gracefully. Watching the scene before him, Fang Hao realized that nobles still danced after dinner. Aren't they afraid of stomach prolapse? At this moment, Rebecca also walked over. Let's go, we're going back. Saying that, she naturally took his arm. Fang Hao also bid farewell to Li Rong. The two then left the manor and got into a carriage. After some fumbling and searching in the carriage returned to their residence. The two also returned to their respective rooms. In the following days, more and more teams arrived in Silverwing City. Walking on the road, one could see teams flying flags of various colors. It was as lively as participating in a festival. There were also more patrol guards in the city. If one walked on the street carrying weapons, there was a high chance of being stopped and inspected. If they didn't have proof of identity, they would be enthusiastically taken away and locked in a small dark room for a private chat. These days, there was basically nothing to do. Rebecca did not attend the banquet. During the day, the women would go together to Xianming Tower to learn makeup. Slowly, Rebecca and Njia's relationship also improved a lot. Sometimes, when they bought something fun, they would take Loli to Rebecca's room to show it off to her. Morning. Fang Hao, accompanied by Dimitrika, went to the Mage Association. He learned about the association's situation but did not register as a mage. Registering as a mage offered many benefits, such as participating in association-organized courses, exchanging resources at the association, and receiving assigned tasks. But these were not very appealing to Fang Hao. The only thing he was somewhat interested in was the mage courses. But even so, he didn't want to register and be subject to the association's supervision. Moreover, he didn't want to reveal his abilities. After purchasing some books around the Mage Association, he returned directly to his residence. He locked himself in his room and continued to decipher the magic eye of Thunder Spirit that he hadn't thoroughly researched yet. On the desk, open books covered the entire desktop. Fang Hao, in a small space in the middle, was holding a pen and recording the stages and feelings of errors that occurred during spell casting in his notebook. Sensing active characteristics, elemental conversion, circulation, condensation, element. What was that word after element again? He wrote this down, immediately opened a book next to him, and quickly flipped through it. Oh, elemental recombination. He recorded all the knowledge little by little. 3 hours later, the paper in front of Fang Hao was already covered with dense writing. It recorded the deficiencies that appeared during his spellcasting. He put down the pen in his hand. He began to condense magic again, feeling the changes in the surrounding air elements little by little, carefully gathering them into the shape he desired. Gradually, in front of him, an owl formed, condensed from silver electric arcs. Seeing the owl condense, Fang Hao's heart was filled with joy. He immediately composed himself again, lest his emotions affect his spellcasting. Soon, the owl was completely formed, and at the same time, Fang Hao felt as if he had an extra clone in his mind. He could feel the owl's position and existence. Shared vision. The next moment, Fang Hao could see himself sitting at the desk through the owl's vision, as well as the owl in his own eyes. Two perspectives appeared simultaneously, as if two images were on one screen. Next, he continued to control the owl, flying out the window and circling the building. The owl's vision was very clear. It was completely no worse than the skeleton ash sparrow's vision. After flying around the residence for a week, Jia and Loli were playing chess in a room on the second floor. On the fourth floor, Rebecca was alone, holding a dress and comparing it in front of a bronze mirror. She was wearing a white silk belly band, and from the side, a large expanse of fair skin was visible. After watching for a while, the owl flew up again. It returned to Fang Hao's room. In terms of reconnaissance, there wasn't much difference between the owl and the skeleton ash sparrow. If we talk about pros and cons, the owl is not a dark species, and releasing it in Silverwing City would not attract the attention of others. As for the skeleton ash sparrow, due to its affiliation with the Undead faction, it is more convenient to speak through the gray sparrow when controlling it. All in all, having an extra skill is a good thing. After the skill was successful, Fang Hao was clearly in a good mood. He asked Fu Lei to trade him some seafood. He intended to treat himself well. After dinner, Fang Hao received a private message from Li Rong. After some discussion, the two agreed to meet at the East City Gate tomorrow morning to explore the underground palace. There was nothing else to do after that. He flirted with Rebecca for a while, then returned to his room to rest. The next day, early morning, Fang Hao, Dimitrika, and Jia, Loli, and 50 Lionheart Knights set off for the North Gate. Even with such a small number of people, along the way, they were constantly questioned by the city's patrol guards. By the time they reached their destination, everyone was tired of being questioned. When they arrived at the North Gate area, they saw Li Rong, who had been waiting for a long time, from afar. "Master Fang Hao, over here." Li Rong waved towards them. Fang Hao and his group approached. Li Rong's gaze, however, fell directly on Dimitrika. Transmigrators have an obsessive fascination with high-ranking heroes. Even females, under the influence of the channel, aim to recruit high-ranking heroes. An orange lizardman hero and a blue orc hero. This was simply unbelievable. At the same time, she was glad she decided to share the map with Fang Hao. Cooperating with such a strong backer would also bring many benefits to her future development. "Why are you alone? Didn't you bring any soldiers?" As the four-legged giant lizard approached, Fang Hao asked softly. Li Rong was waiting at the gate by herself on horseback, seemingly without any retinue. "Oh, my soldiers are in my territory. Silverwing City is strictly monitored now, and the mercenary group can't bring too many people in and out of the city gate at once. I'll take you out first, and we'll pick up my people when we pass by my territory," Li Rong explained. "Oh, then let's go." And as they rode together and approached the city gate, Li Rong took out her mercenary credentials. After explaining to the guards, she waved and went straight out of the city gate. Once there were fewer people on the road, everyone spurred their horses to follow Li Rong towards her territory. The group left the city and rode far away. A disheveled, sloppily dressed middle-aged man emerged from the corner. He wiped his greasy hands. He pulled out a communicating conch shell from his bosom. He softly said, "Leader, that kid has left the city, with about 50 people with him." After speaking, he waited in silence. Soon, a somewhat hoarse male voice came from the conch shell. "Are there any heroes?" The sloppy man replied, "There's a lizard man wearing golden armor, most likely a hero." The hoarse voice sounded again. "Good. Follow them and see where they're going. I'll organize people here." "Understood, leader." The sloppy man stood up and walked out of the shadows. He led a horse out of a courtyard, left the city, and followed the target from a distance. After riding for 3 or 4 hours, a transmigrator city appeared ahead. They did not approach. A team of people quickly came from the city. They directly joined the marching party. These were Li Rong's soldiers. There were over 100 of them in total, all equipped with armor and weapons, but the number of horses was not large. Among them, 20 were cavalry, and the rest were sword and shield soldiers and ranged soldiers. The number of the team increased, but the marching speed would definitely slow down. The journey was extremely boring. There were no unexpected incidents, and even when they deviated from the main city road and went deep into the dense forest, wild beasts were rarely seen. Along the way, he chatted a lot with Li Rong about Silverwing City, and he heard Li Rong proudly introduce her next business plan. Next, she also planned to expand her industries to various cities. This was also the industry Li Rong planned to develop next, developing catering, clothing, and even the tobacco industry. She had almost finished researching this tobacco, and it didn't have as serious health hazards as cigarettes in her previous life. If it could be popularized, it would definitely be a very lucrative industry. After camping in the wilderness for the night, everyone finally saw the pond she spoke of by noon the next day. The pond was very large. Their approach startled the animals drinking and resting around the pond. They bared their teeth for a moment, then scattered and fled. Everyone dismounted in front of the pond. Dimitrika organized people to inspect and defend. Li Rong took out a wooden box from her bosom, poured out a cigarette, put it in her mouth, and lit it. With a gentle puff, a rich aroma diffused. "Master, this is the pond I mentioned. Let's rest for a bit, then we'll go in. There's no danger underwater, but the situation in the underground palace is unclear." Fang Hao nodded. Leave some people on alert above." The rest also began to rest before the exploration. Not long after, the water surface churned, and Dimitrika's head emerged. "Sir, the entrance to the underground palace has been found. Everyone can just swim down along the rope." "Good. Lizardmen's mobility underwater is much better than humans." Very easily, they found the entrance Li Rong spoke of, and after exploring outside, found no danger. Next, Fang Hao made simple arrangements. He left 20 people on the shore under Njia's command, and Li Rong left 50 people. This was to prevent any danger from appearing on the riverbank and blocking their retreat. Although Njia was unwilling, she still obeyed Fang Hao's command. Reluctantly, she stayed behind. Fang Hao didn't waste any time, waving his hand. "Let's go, down we go. Dive along the rope, don't get lost." After speaking, he grabbed the back of the four-legged giant lizard. With a splash, he plunged into the pond. The four-legged giant lizard is an amphibious mount. Underwater, it's still fast and agile. Fang Hao gripped the saddle with one hand and slid down a hemp rope that dangled from the shore, diving quickly. Gurgle. Bubbles fizzed past his ears as a school of fish circled them. Soon the descent slowed. Ahead, a huge stone cavern appeared. The giant lizard carried Fang Hao straight inside. After another stretch of swimming, they followed the rope upward again. A faint light glimmered overhead. "Looks like we've arrived." Splash. They broke the surface. Fang Hao exhaled sharply. Beside him, Dimitrika, one hand holding a night stone, hauled him out with the other. "Bring the rest across," Fang Hao said, patting the lizard's back. Glug. The giant lizard submerged again to ferry the others. It was a long dive. Poor stamina meant drowning halfway. "My lord, we seem to be inside a mountain," Dimitrika murmured, raising the nightstone. The dim glow revealed jagged stone walls all around. Above, darkness swallowed the ceiling. On the right, a vast tunnel gaped, pitch black within. A short while later, bubbles rose on the water below. The giant lizard surfaced with Loli and 4 Lionheart Knights. Fang Hao and Dimitrika pulled them ashore. More heads popped up in quick succession. Among them, Li Rong gasped, face purple from lack of air. Fang Hao dragged her up. "You okay?" Suffocating. "That mount of yours deliberately dodged me when I tried to hitch a ride," she panted, lodging her complaint. The giant lizard glanced over with one huge eye, then curled up and lay flat. "It doesn't know you. On the way out, I'll have it carry you," Fang Hao explained. Li Rong really had been on the verge of passing out. Her lips were lavender. A few more minutes, and she'd have been done for. Fine. "All right, check your gear. Time to explore," Fang Hao called. He opened the Lord's book and drew out bolt-action rifles. These he handed to his Lionheart Knights. Back in Silverwing City, he had stowed every rifle in the demon space. Now he reissued them. The Lionheart Knights inspected the weapons with practiced ease. Next came nightstones, potions, and detonators. Item after item was passed around, leaving Li Rong's group wide-eyed. What the hell? They'd thought this would be rough-and-ready cave survival. But 50 guns? And all that gear? He was handing it out like candy. Li Rong suddenly felt awkward. Her people sat in stunned silence. She had believed she was doing well. Maybe her heroes weren't as strong as Fang Hao's, but her business empire was huge. Surely her wealth matched his. Yet here he was tossing out nightstones and rifles as if they were free. The contrast between their two groups was night and day. When everything was ready, Fang Hao turned to Li Rong. "I'll scout with a skill, stand by." "Sure, you're the boss," Li Rong said. Fang Hao snapped his fingers. A lightning-formed owl crackled into being beside him. Under everyone's gaze, the owl flew into the pitch-black tunnel. The Thunder Spirit Owl had night vision, and Fang Hao shared its sight. The cave was deep and dark. Soon the tunnel split into many winding forks. Rush and unprepared, and you'd lose your bearings. Every passage looked alike unless you marked them. Get lost in here, and you might never find your way out. Still, Fang Hao spotted opportunities. The mineral veins were rich. Gem-type deposits, once mined, would yield a fortune. After clearing the place, he could propose a joint operation with Li Rong. The Thunder Spirit soon located the main route inward. The path narrowed to a single track. Mushrooms and moss began to coat the walls. Fist-sized white caps fringed with lacy filaments looked like parasols of white lace. Thick moss spread across floor and stone, forming a glowing fungal carpet. It shone with the same pale green light as modern phosphorescent paint. The deeper they went, the denser the growth became, tightening into a circular tunnel. The eerie green glow in the silent cave was downright creepy. Among the fungus lay gray-white crystals half buried in the growth. Shadowstone. This really was territory of the dark. Beyond the fungal zone, the Thunder Spirit reached the cavern's heart. A vast hall, stadium-sized, opened out. No fungus grew here. Carved reliefs covered the walls. Corroded lamp brackets jutted from the stone. Nightstones littered the floor, still glowing softly. Intact stone buildings stood among scattered signs of life. It looked like a miniature underground city. In the center, rank upon rank of soldiers knelt in perfect formation, heads bowed as if asleep. Their armor had rotted, plates hung in tatters. A closer look revealed their unit tags. Spirit Binding Guard, Tier 7. Visible names and tiers meant they were still combat-ready units. What stunned Fang Hao was that every single one of them was Tier 7. 300-odd Undead elites. Undead plus Tier 7 made for formidable fighters. With his current force, a fight here would be risky. Survey complete. Fang Hao dismissed the spell. The Thunder Spirit Owl dissolved into sparks. Fang Hao recovered. He opened the Lord's book to study the auto-mapped route. Then he called Dimitrika and Li Rong over. There are many forks inside, but only one leads to the underground palace. The rest are dead ends, she said softly. The map was drawn very clearly. One could see winding side passages, quite a few of them. Got it, Li Rong nodded. Fang Hao went on. Inside the palace are 7th-tier undead troops, over 300 of them. That many? Li Rong gasped. She'd known it would be dangerous, but hadn't expected the monsters to be that high level. They were all already at Tier 7. The 100 men she'd brought were only tier 3, and in a gloomy stone tunnel like this. Every advantage lay with the enemy. Master Fang Hao, what do we do? Li Rong looked up at him. Right now, if Fang Hao had no plan, they'd have to swim back the way they'd come, and return to explore the palace only once they were stronger. Fang Hao pondered, then conferred with Dimitrika. We can give it a try. If it fails, we'll swim back underwater. All right, tell us how. Li Rong didn't want this trip to be wasted. If Fang Hao left, she probably wouldn't be able to take the palace for another year or more. Fang Hao continued. The tunnel to the palace is full of forks and pretty narrow. Attacking inside would put us at a disadvantage. The best way is to lure the undead out and block the tunnel mouth so they can't use their numbers against us. His idea was simple. At most 3 or 4 men could stand abreast in the stone passage. In the tightest spots, you couldn't even raise a sword. They'd hold the entrance and fire rifles inside. If it worked, great. If not, they still had time to jump into the water and swim back. Li Rong nodded. The plan sounded worth trying. Except that would leave her and her men with nothing to do. They had no ranged weapons. Standing around cheering didn't feel right. After a moment, Li Rong's eyes lit up with an add-on to Fang Hao's idea. Master Fang Hao, I'll have some flammables traded over. When the undead come out, we'll burn them alive. Oil was a restricted commodity and hard to obtain, but substitutes were easy to find. Fang Hao shook his head. In a closed space like this, we'd burn up the oxygen and end up suffocating ourselves. True. That left Li Rong without a better option. With no superior alternative. Fang Hao said, Dimitrika, set it up. We'll follow this plan. If it fails, we pull back. Yes, my lord. Dimitrika answered and began preparations. Fang Hao's side bustled with activity. They placed nightstones along the tunnel and set obstacles to slow the enemy. Then the Lionheart Knights formed ranks at the entrance. Front row prone, second row kneeling, third row standing. Even so, only 4 men per row could fire. Behind the guards, a dragon-locking ballista was positioned dead center on the passage. My lord, we're ready, Dimitrika reported. Fang Hao nodded. Send someone to lure the undead out. Yes, sir. A scout was chosen and entered the cave at once. Afraid he might take a wrong turn and panic on the way back, they tied a hemp rope around his waist. He only needed to follow the rope to return. After readying himself, the scout drew a deep breath and strode into the cave. Everyone fell silent, waiting. Soon hurried footsteps echoed from the depths. Lit by the nightstones, they could see the scout racing out in a panic, stumbling and crashing forward. Ready, Dimitrika ordered. Dense footsteps sounded from deep inside. Moments later, spirit-binding guards in rotted armor packed the tunnel. Fire, Dimitrika commanded coldly. Bang bang, bang bang. A hail of bullets poured into the cave. After the first volley, the front ranks of undead merely shuddered under the impact. But they kept coming. Keep firing. Bang bang. The gunfire continued. Only after the second round did some undead fall and stay down. The shots went on, echoing through the area, the air reeking of powder. Inside the cave, several more spirit-binding guards collapsed after a few more volleys. Watching from above the entrance through his thunder spirit, Fang Hao noticed something new. Pale blue flames flickered in the empty eye sockets of the undead. The still-standing guards hoisted their fallen comrades as shields, advanced faster, and chopped at the barricades with black scimitars. They passed the broken obstacles back to the rear and tossed them into side forks. The sight startled Fang Hao. Using corpses as shields and cooperating to clear the path showed these undead troops possessed high intelligence. With intelligence and an undead body, they were effectively immortal. Seeing the bullets had little effect, Dimitrika ordered, soldiers aside, ballista fire. The front ranks quickly stepped to both sides, clearing the lane. Bang! A deafening twang rang out as a spear-thick, barbed bolt howled down the tunnel. With a ripping sound, it shot straight into the cave. Crash! The dragon-locking ballista, built to hunt dragons, was immensely powerful. In a blink, the bolt reached the undead. Crash! Like skewered kebabs, it pierced a whole row, and the barbed head, driven by tremendous force, shattered the guards' bodies. Boom! The bolt buried itself in the far wall. Only scattered spirit-binding guards remained. The passage looked almost empty. Cheers rose in everyone's heart at the sight. The plan was working. If the ballista had failed, they would have had to retreat to the surface. Now that it proved effective, clearing the place would be only a matter of time. Reload the ballista. Muskets keep firing. Another mass of spirit-binding guards charged round the bend, moving faster, grabbing their dead comrades' corpses. To block bullets as they sprinted forward, the shooting continued. Bullets poured into the cave like raindrops. However, their power was far inferior to that of the ballista bolts. Although spirit-binding guards were still falling, the rate of death was too slow. Soon, the cave was once again filled with dense crowds of undead. They crowded together, rushing toward the outside. Dimitrika ordered again, "Musketeers, pull back. Ballistae, fire." Bang! The ballista bolts whistled out once more. The undead along the path suffered heavy casualties instantly. The remaining spirit-binding guards who were lucky enough not to be knocked down were turned into sieves by the following bullets. After several rounds, the cave ahead was already littered with the fallen bones and equipment of the spirit-binding guards, along with orange-yellow bullets and dragon-locking bolts embedded in the mountain walls. However, after this round ended, the cave fell silent. No spirit-binding guards came out. The entire cave was empty. There wasn't a single sound. The number they had just killed was roughly estimated to be less than 300. This meant that at the corner of the cave, where bullets couldn't shoot in a straight line, there were still many spirit-binding guards who hadn't come out. "It seems those with intelligence are harder to deal with," Fang Hao said. "My lord, the enemy has stopped chasing us out." Dimitrika had the soldiers stay alert toward the cave as he walked over to Fang Hao. Fang Hao nodded and said, "By my count, there should be far more than this. These undead must have some intelligence. They know they can't charge out, so they're hiding. Then, I'll send someone in to take a look." Fang Hao shook his head. "I'll use a lightning spirit to take a look. Everyone, get ready." After speaking, he condensed another lightning spirit owl. It continued to fly into the depths of the cave. Turning the corner at the junction, he saw many undead blocking one side of the passage. Their eerie blue pupils all looked toward the lightning spirit in the air in unison. Yet, not one of them took a step past the corner. They simply stared fixedly at the air with dark, cold expressions. Fang Hao controlled the lightning spirit to fly a bit higher. He looked deeper from above. He roughly calculated the remaining number. There were about 40 or 50 spirit-binding guards left. Next, Fang Hao tried to lure them out. These undead only swung their weapons, slashing and driving it away. But they still had no intention of coming out. Seeing that luring the mobs was fruitless, he simply controlled the lightning spirit to crash headlong into the leading spirit-binding guard. The lightning spirit shattered instantly, and silver electric snakes spread across 3 or 4 spirit-binding guards. It made their bodies tremble uncontrollably, but there was no obvious damage. After the reconnaissance was complete, Fang Hao drew the iron sword from his waist and drew a map of the interior on the ground. Pointing at the corner, he said, "These undead are all gathered here. I tried to lure them out with the lightning spirit, but I didn't succeed." "So, they're waiting for us to go in," Li Rong said. "Yes, the dragon-locking ballista can't enter the cave at all. These undead have recognized this and are hiding there waiting," Fang Hao replied softly, leaning on his iron sword. "Then what should we do?" If the soldiers wanted to maintain a straight line of fire, they would have to enter the position at the cave's corner. To meet this condition, the distance from the enemy would only be about 4 meters. By then, once these spirit-binding guards rushed out, it would be difficult even to escape. Fang Hao didn't speak. Dimitrika, standing nearby, directly interrupted Li Rong's subsequent words. "My lord, I can lead the soldiers to charge in. Dealing with this few undead won't be a problem." Dimitrika was a combat hero. His close combat ability was top tier within the territory. Moreover, his combat techniques were very strong. Fang Hao thought carefully. There were only a few spirit-binding guards left. In the narrow terrain of the cave, it would be difficult for the enemy to form an encirclement. It shouldn't be a problem for Dimitrika. After making up his mind, he said directly, "All right, Everyone get ready. In a moment, Dimitrika will lead a few people in, and we will support you from the outside. Understood, my lord. Dimitrika stepped back again to make final preparations. Li Rong didn't say anything more. She just kept glancing between Fang Hao and Dimitrika. Before long, Dimitrika came out with 5 Lionheart Knights. My lord, we are ready. And be careful. If you find anything wrong, retreat, and we'll think of another way. Fang Hao instructed. Understood. Dimitrika gave a slight wave and led the 5 Lionheart Knights into the cave, weapons in hand. Fang Hao summoned another lightning spirit owl. It followed them inside. Dimitrika led the way, walking straight along the cave path. The Lionheart Knights behind him held their weapons, with nightstones hanging from their waists, following closely behind. The lightning spirit possessed night vision and could see clearly even in the dim light. They moved forward and finally reached the fork in the road. Dimitrika didn't speak. He simply raised his long sword and walked in. The spirit binding guards, who had been frozen in place, saw the living beings entering. The soul fire in their eye sockets flared up violently. Immediately after, they raised their weapons and lunged at the living beings before them. Seeing the enemies rushing in, Dimitrika's expression didn't change in the slightest. He pointed with his left hand. He released the heretic mark, labeling all the enemies in front of him. Kill. Once the marks were all applied, Dimitrika gave a loud shout and led the charge. Head on, a scimitar was raised high and slashed down. Dimitrika parried slightly with his long sword, and the scimitar's direction was diverted, striking the body of a nearby undead companion. Both undead were stunned for a moment, turning their heads to look at each other simultaneously. Then, before they could turn back, with a sweep of his long sword, he severed the heads of the 2 spirit binding guards in front. Following that, Dimitrika's long sword turned into streaks of flowing light. Skeleton bodies continuously flew up and then fell. His feet didn't stop as he pushed forward rapidly. The Lionheart Knights following behind also kept swinging their weapons. They began to finish off the fallen and clean up the stray undead. Standing outside the cave, although Fang Hao couldn't see Dimitrika's attack moves and motions clearly. From above, he could see the skeletal remains constantly flying and falling. These enemies posed no threat to Dimitrika. Half an hour later, the sounds of battle inside the cave weakened. The fight was over. In this narrow fork, the ground was now piled high with the corpses of spirit binding guards. They were spread from the entrance all the way to the end of his vision. And Dimitrika, holding his sheathed long sword, walked out bit by bit with the 5 Lionheart Knights. It appeared these few hadn't suffered any injuries, though the Lionheart Knights' breathing was a bit unsteady. They were taking deep breaths of the surrounding air. Seeing them return safely, Fang Hao also let out a sigh of relief. In any battle, his strategy was primarily based on human wave tactics. Although the heroes he had were not low in strength, he never intended to let them take risks unless absolutely necessary. But today was different. This place was too close to Silverwing City. He couldn't possibly mobilize his own undead army. That was why he let Dimitrika lead the way in clearing the remaining enemies. Even if it was no problem for Dimitrika to clear them, in a life-and-death struggle in a strange environment, he still feared some accident might happen. Fang Hao let Dimitrika and the others rest, then said to Li Rong, Li Rong, clean up the inside. Have your people collect the loot and move the skeletons out. Oh, Li Rong replied instinctively. When she saw Dimitrika leading the 5 men back unharmed just now, she was completely stunned. Didn't they say there were still 40 or 50 undead inside? How did they come back so quickly? And they looked exactly the same as when they went in. But the sounds of fighting had indeed vanished, and Fang Hao had no reason to lie to her. Since she hadn't helped at all during the battle, the cleanup work naturally fell on her. She immediately called her subordinates. Come on, everyone go in to clean up the battlefield. Separate the skeletons and the equipment. Clatter. Li Rong's subordinates all stood up. They first entered the cave cautiously, seeing that the undead were indeed all killed and there was no danger. They then began to swarm in and started carrying the corpses out. Soon, the cave was cleared. The platform on the lakeshore was also piled with stripped equipment and skeletons. Fang Hao, to the side, crafted another batch of bullets. He continued, Li Rong, space inside the cave is limited. If too many people go in and there's danger, we won't be able to retreat. You come in with me, and the rest can stay outside. Li Rong also knew there was a significant gap between the strength of her troops and Fang Hao's. Naturally, she had no reason to refuse. She said directly to her subordinates, You guys stay here and transport all of this out. Li Rong had quite a few subordinates, and they began to get busy. They started packing and bundling the decayed equipment, then transporting it out through the lake bottom. Meanwhile, Fang Hao's group began to enter the cave. Their exposed skin could even feel a sense of chilling cold. They walked all the way in. The area, overgrown with mushrooms and fungal mats, had been trampled into a mess of mud by the spirit-binding guards. By the time they entered, they didn't even have to worry about whether these plants would release any toxic gases. He had people collect all the shadow stones in the vicinity. They entered the underground palace directly. The space, the size of a football field, was now empty. It was hollow, just like a haunted house. Spread out and see if there are any valuable items. Pay special attention to treasure chests, Fang Hao ordered. The soldiers instantly dispersed and began their search. Soon, reports came from all around. My lord, many gold items were found over here. My lord, burial objects were also found here. Hearing this, Fang Hao inspected the two locations where the voices came from. He indeed saw many exquisitely patterned gold vessels. On the other side were gems, rotted silk products, and various jars and pots. Looking at the patterns on them, Fang Hao frowned and squatted down, picking up a gold piece to examine it closely. The patterns on the gold were still clear. It was evident that the craftsmen who made them were of top-tier skill. However, he had seen these patterns before. On the walls of the Organ Museum and on Nielsen's clothing, there were identical patterns. It really was a place of the undead. The undead race was more like extremely ascetic monks, believing that the world of the flesh was merely a brief illusion, while eternal life was the goal they pursued. And the owner of these burial objects before him must have been an undead with a status at least equal to Nielsen's. Otherwise, according to the rules and order of the undead world, such vessels could not be buried with them. Look at this, a misunderstanding among our own. How did we end up digging into our own home? Fang Hao muttered to himself. He had originally thought it was a burial ground where, over time, the corpses inside had transformed into undead. This kind of transformation was the most common. The ancient tomb that Dong Jiayue first explored was the tomb of a human king. The swarms of skeleton soldiers that appeared there were simply because they had all turned into undead over time. But now it seemed this place was built by orthodox undead. Li Rong didn't hear Fang Hao clearly and asked instinctively, What misunderstanding? Big boss, are you saying this is some kind of shrine? Fang Hao put the gold piece back. No, it's nothing. Then he looked at the surrounding soldiers. Found any treasure chests? Yes. Then a silver treasure chest was carried over by two soldiers and dropped on the ground. It was only silver. This left Fang Hao somewhat disappointed. Moreover, it shouldn't be. Given the specifications and defensive strength of this underground palace, there shouldn't be nothing else besides these Tier 7 guards. Could his analysis be wrong? Were these gold and silver vessels all buried with these spirit-binding guards? Why would guards have burial objects? At that moment, Loli ran over quickly and said excitedly, Lord Fang Hao, I found a secret door. There are stairs leading up inside. Hearing this news, Fang Hao was delighted. As expected, this wasn't the end. There was a second floor. Let's go, let's take a look. The whole group marched toward the deepest part of this level of the underground palace. At the dark end, a stone door had been opened in the wall. Inside was a set of stone steps extending upward, with no end in sight. Well done. Fang Hao rubbed Loli's small head. Hee. Loli smiled shyly, puffing out her chest as if she had performed a great feat. Set up defenses here at the stone door. There should be enemies above as well. Dimitrika began to make arrangements. They set up various obstacles at the entrance. At the same time, the soldiers formed a semicircle, with their gun barrels pointing straight at the stone door. Fang Hao crafted 2 more dragon-locking ballistae. Once everything was ready, he summoned a lightning spirit, which flew directly into the stone door and upward vertically. It reached the entrance to the second floor. The stone door to the second floor was open, and inside was another spacious hall. Spirit binding guards were sitting on their knees with their heads bowed, arranged in neat rows. And at the very back of the spirit binding guards was a skeleton with a tall, burly frame. Standing nearly 2 meters tall, it leaned on a rusty, precious sword. Its armor was also tattered, and the cloak behind it was like strips of torn cloth, draped over its back. The skeleton sat just like that on a stone throne at the back. It looked like a king, and also like a general. Needless to say, Fang Hao knew this was likely a boss. After scouting the situation, Fang Hao directly controlled the owl to crash headlong into the spirit binding guard at the very front. The spreading electric current made the spirit binding guard's body tremble. Clatter. At the same time, all the kneeling spirit binding guards raised their heads in unison. And from the empty eye sockets of that tall skeleton at the very back, 2 eerie blue flames suddenly flared up. Roar! The tall skeleton let out a roar of rage. All the spirit binding guards stood up together, snarling as they rushed toward the stairs below. Thump! 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 Dense and messy footsteps echoed from the stairs. The footsteps grew closer, and the armor scraped and clanged. Under everyone's gaze, the first bound spirit guard rushed out, its head turning blankly. Only when it saw the humans opposite did it identify its enemy target. And after the first undead appeared, the second, the third, and densely packed bound spirit guards, holding rusty curved swords, crowded out of the stairwell. Their eyes swept over the humans, and they roared and attacked. At the same time, Manga also issued an order, attack. Bang bang, boom. A dense rain of bullets poured down, and in the blink of an eye, the undead in the front row fell. Unlike the initial concentrated fire of the few people at the cave entrance. Here, everyone used rifles, and the bullets were denser. The damage also increased additively. Those undead who had just shown their heads were directly shot into sieves. Everything was going smoothly, and Li Rome, who was next to him, also showed a smile. It seems there's no problem this time. Fang Hao shook his head. Don't be happy too soon. There was a boss on the second floor just now. Boss? Li Rome was startled. However, before she could ask for details, a tall undead figure wearing scattered armor had already appeared at the stairwell entrance. It stepped on the bodies of the undead, bent over, and walked out of the stairwell doorway. Imperial Tomb General Gustav, Blue Tier 5 hero. Indeed, it was a hero. And a blue undead hero. Watching the undead hero walk out of the doorway, dragging its rusty long sword on the ground, it was already rushing towards the crowd. Fang Hao loudly ordered, keep shooting. Bang bang bang. Bullets rained down on the undead hero as if they were free. However, as the bullets splattered down, the broken armor on the skeleton hero became even more fragmented. Underneath the armor, the skeleton hero's bones could be seen. The bullets passed through the gaps in the bones and shot into the wall behind. Seeing this scene, Fang Hao's eyes widened. Skeletons have this function? Using the gaps in the bones to evade bullet-type attacks? Good heavens, another advantageous trait of the undead discovered. No wonder these bound spirit guards are so difficult to kill. It's not that the rifles aren't powerful enough, but that the bullets are passing through the gaps in the skeleton frames. The battle continued. The dense bullets slowed down the skeleton hero's advance, its eerie blue eyes scanning everyone present. The resentment hidden deep within the soul fire could be felt. With the skeleton hero attracting firepower, the rest of the bound spirit guards also quickly rushed forward. Fang Hao immediately said, Manga, you deal with this skeleton hero. Everyone else shoot the ordinary undead. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone immediately took action. Manga drew the long sword from his waist and walked towards the skeleton hero. And the rest of the Lionheart Knights also quickly changed positions to shoot the bound spirit guards pouring out from behind. The weapon used by the skeleton hero was a heavy longsword. Dragging it with one hand, the rusty blade scraped and collided with the ground, making a harsh noise. The eerie blue soul fire flickered. Its gaze also turned towards the lizard man walking towards it. Moving its feet, dragging its long sword, it also walked towards the lizardman's direction. As the distance between the two sides grew closer, the skeleton hero's footsteps also became faster and faster. As they approached, it had already turned into a sprint. The long sword in its hand scraped a series of sparks on the ground. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton hero had already sprinted to a distance of 3 meters. It raised the long sword in its hand and slashed down towards Dimitka's head. Ah! Seeing this scene, Lirong couldn't help but exclaim. Subconsciously, her heart had already leaped into her throat. If this sword strike connected, let alone a hero, even a stone would be split in half. Everyone was a little nervous. On the contrary, Dimitka remained as calm as ever. He calmly raised the long sword in his hand and held it horizontally above him. Clang! The two swords collided, and the harsh metallic clang quickly echoed through the hall. The skeleton hero, with a powerful and heavy slash, didn't even cause Dimitka to retreat half a step. He just took it so effortlessly. Immediately after, Dimitka swept his longsword, knocking aside the skeleton hero's longsword. The skeleton hero only felt the long sword in its hand uncontrollably deviate to the side, and the lizardman's second sword strike had already been unleashed. Fierce slash. A fiery red light appeared on Dimitka's longsword. It slashed towards the skeleton hero's skull. The skeleton hero's soul fire trembled. It exerted force with its feet, and its body directly leaped backward, narrowly dodging this sword strike. Seeing the opponent retreat, Dimitka raised his sword and pursued closely. The long sword in his hand turned into one sword light after another, chasing after it and hacking fiercely. And the initially menacing skeleton hero could only retreat. The iron sword in its hand was held horizontally across its chest, awkwardly blocking the opponent's attack. Dimitka delivered a heavy slash, and the skeleton hero's body uncontrollably leaned backward. With another horizontal sweep, he cut off the skeleton hero's legs. Following with 2 more sword strikes, he again cut off its arms, completely incapacitating the tall and mighty skeleton hero. At the same time, the bound spirit guards on the side were also cleared out. The narrow stairwell entrance was piled high with the bones of the undead. Lirong understood her job, quickly ran out, called her subordinates, and began to move things out. And Fang Hao came to the front of the skeleton hero. Looking down at the skeleton hero, whose legs and arms were broken and whose soul fire was still flickering. Can you communicate? Fang Hao stared at it and asked. The skeleton hero did not answer, only stared intently at the human in front of it. Fang Hao continued, I'll ask you a few questions. If you answer me, I won't kill you, how about it? The skeleton hero still didn't speak. This made Fang Hao even doubt if this undead couldn't speak. But he still continued to ask, what is this place, and what are you guarding here? When he said this, the skeleton hero's soul fire began to tremble. A hoarse, grating voice sounded. You will die here, and take our place, to continue guarding the imperial tomb. The emotions of the undead are limited. They also fear death and no anger. But the lack of a body makes them less intense. The hatred felt by humans will be diluted in their hearts. An irreconcilable hatred is merely the hatred of killing one's father. Imperial tomb? Is this the royal family's mausoleum? Who is here? Fang Hao continued to ask. The skeleton hero did not speak, remaining silent. Next, Fang Hao asked many more questions. No matter how he threatened or tempted, the skeleton hero did not say a second word. Fang Hao cleared his throat. Standing up, he said, Very good, I am very satisfied with your answer. I agree to you joining my territory and becoming a hero. Next to him, Lirong was dumbfounded. Is this how heroes are recruited? No wonder there are so many heroes around Boss Fang Hao. Ah, I've learned something. The skeleton hero also turned its head and looked at Fang Hao. The hoarse voice sounded again. I will not surrender to you. As soon as the words fell, the soul fire in the skeleton hero's eye sockets quickly extinguished, finally scattering into a pile of white bones. Fang Hao looked at the white bones on the ground, frowning. So stubborn. Undead are different from living beings. After living beings die, they can be made into undead. But once the soul fire of an undead is extinguished, the body can no longer be transformed. In other words, there is no way for Nelson to turn the dead undead into undead heroes again. All right, put his skeleton aside separately. It might still be useful, Fang Hao said. It doesn't matter if it's dead. The skeleton can still be made into a demon puppet. Next to him, Li Rong's subordinates had already started moving things out. Fang Hao and the others rested for a while. After clearing the stairwell, the group of people ascended to the second floor again. The second floor was still a stone chamber. However, the stone chamber was smaller, but the decoration was more like a small city. Around it, there were various stone buildings. On one side of the skeleton hero's throne, there was also a courtyard made of stone. They had people inspect the courtyard. Most of the artifacts had already decayed, but the layout could be seen to be quite complete. Next, Luo Li successively discovered the passages leading to the next level. Each level had bound spirit guards, which were cleared out one by Fang Hao and the others using the same tactics. 8th floor. Fang Hao and everyone else were a little tired. They didn't know how many levels there were inside. After clearing each level, they would find the entrance to the next level. One level after another going up, and the area of the rooms on each level was shrinking. The level they were on now, the area had shrunk to about 100 square meters. Similarly, the golden artifacts found in the rooms increased with each level. Quick, quick, be nimble with your movements. Move everything out, wrap them tightly in leather, and transport them directly outside. Li Rong commanded her subordinates at the entrance, her face flushed with excitement. So many gold artifacts. After splitting them with Fang Hao, it would be enough for her to buy the shops on the commercial street. By then, it would truly be her personal property. Moreover, the biggest gain was the treasure chests. One treasure chest per level made her face beam with joy. Fang Hao wasn't too interested in these low-level treasure chests, but Li Rong didn't think that way. She rarely explored maps, so she naturally hadn't seen many treasure chests. Now there were 8. According to the previous agreement, if they split them in half, she would have 4. Although she hadn't done much work, the heavy lifting was all done by her people, and she, such a great beauty, had pulled her collar so low and chatted with him. She should at least get 2, right? While thinking, Fang Hao on the side had already called out, Luo Li, is there a staircase to the next level? The room on this 8th level wasn't large. Luo Li was carefully examining the wall not far away. Without answering, she gently tapped on the wall. Crash! The sound of stones rubbing against each other echoed. Accompanied by the dust falling from the ceiling, a hole opened on one side. There really was. This place was like a bottomless pit of nesting dolls, always revealing the next room. Inside the stone door, it was no longer a dim and decaying stone staircase. Instead, it was a long, narrow, luxuriously decorated corridor, but covered in thick dust. The corridor was less than 10 meters long, and various gold artifacts and statues were placed close to the walls. And on the walls, colorful frescoes, whose colors were still vibrant, could be seen. At the end of the long corridor were 2 stone doors covered with symbols and patterns. The stone doors were tightly closed, and this should be the final level. A few people poked their heads in and looked for a while. They didn't find any danger. Don't open the stone door at the end, move gently, and move everything here out, Fang Hao softly instructed. This corridor was not large, but it was filled with various statues made of gold. They didn't need Li Rong's people anymore. The rest of the Lionheart Knights all went in. They started moving the gold statues out. And Fang Hao began to look at the patterns on both sides of the wall. The patterns were well preserved, the colors were still vivid, and the scenes and stories depicted could be clearly understood. The more he looked, the more nervous Fang Hao became. Judging from the scenes and the frescoes, this place was indeed built by the undead. This place should be called a tomb, but for the undead, it could be called a temporary palace. That is, a place of temporary residence or a place of hibernation. The owner of this temporary palace was a female undead because the patterns in the frescoes showed her wearing relatively bright clothing. Moreover, the depiction also expressed female characteristics. Continuing further in, Fang Hao saw kneeling corpse mages and funeral priests in the frescoes. And this woman, holding a scepter, sat on the throne overlooking below. Good heavens! It really was royalty. Even the corpse mages were painted relatively small in the frescoes, serving as unimportant background to highlight the majesty of the woman on the throne. If he hadn't known Nelson's attire, he would have really thought that those kneeling below were just ordinary undead. After seeing everything, the entire long corridor was also cleared out. "Lord, shall we open the stone door?" Dimika walked over and asked softly. Li Rong also looked over at the same time. The treasure chest on this last level should be of a higher grade. But Fang Hao didn't think so. He said softly, "This door cannot be opened. Everyone wait for me at the entrance, and we will retreat immediately." Retreat? Aren't we exploring the stone door ahead? Li Rong also came closer at this time, her tone a little unwilling. Having already reached this point, she was still a little unwilling to retreat. There might be dangers inside that we can't handle. We might all die here. This sentence was not to scare Li Rong. If there was no one on the next level, it would be fine, but if the owner of this underground palace was there, I'm afraid all of them would be in danger. Even if they could escape, half of the people would die. Fang Hao had teleportation, but he couldn't teleport so many people. Besides, facing a true powerhouse, teleportation might not even work. Is it that serious? Li Rong finally retreated. Fang Hao didn't linger in the long corridor either. He used the Lord's book to take pictures of the colorful paintings on the wall. He directly sent them to Zhang Bin and asked him to take the photos to find Nelson. And all of them retreated from the long corridor. After closing the stone door, they directly retreated out of the water pool, and Jia was guarding the shore with her people. Various damaged weapons and equipment, as well as gold and silver artifacts and burial objects, were piled up into 2 small mountains. The harvest was quite significant. Fang Hao also used the Lord's book to create a few carriages to transport the goods. They had been out for several days in a row. Everyone was a little tired and wished they could fly back to rest immediately. They worked much more efficiently. After packing everything up, everyone immediately set off to return. In a forest 100 miles west of the water pool, under the night sky, towering giant trees covered the clouds and blocked the moon, and the dense forest stretched out endlessly. From time to time, the howling of beasts and the chirping of birds echoed, making the rarely visited dense forest even more silent. In this dark and silent atmosphere, a few voices of conversation sounded. "Are we going to ambush an army? They've called in most of the people from the group. Could it be the Silver Wing City Patrol? Who knows? They were all transferred by the leader. There are over 300 people in total, all good hands from the group. I guess they must have set their sights on some merchant group." Merchant group? We have so many people here. Even if it's an army, we can keep all of them here. Next to him, a mercenary with disheveled hair and dressed like a beggar, half squatted in the forest, wiping his iron sword. Hearing his companion's incessant chatter and speculation, he spoke softly. He explained, "This time the leader's order is to kill everyone, not leaving a single one. After it's done, everyone will benefit." Kill everyone? How many people are there? The other side has over 100 people, all militiamen with little strength. We have more than twice their number, so it's an easy job. Hearing that the other side only had a little over 100 people, everyone instantly relaxed. Fighting with more people against fewer, and they were all militiamen, this was their strength. It could be said that this mission had no difficulty whatsoever. While chatting, a figure was seen rapidly running through the forest. It was the scout placed in the distance. Everyone fell silent at the same time, listening to the intelligence brought back by the scout. They're almost here, over 100 people, and they have carriages when they return. The beggar-dressed mercenary nodded. We'll finish it quickly when they arrive. Swish, swish, swish. Everyone drew their weapons and slowed their breathing, and in front of their vision, flashes of fire appeared in the distance on the road, approaching this way. At night, the autumn wind was bleak. In the deep mountains and old forests, a centurion team drove a carriage, moving forward on a path overgrown with weeds. Fang Hao sat on the back of a 4-legged giant lizard, looking at the map in his hand, and occasionally looked up at the somewhat gloomy night sky. Li Rong, how much longer until we get there? Li Rong also looked at her map. It's probably another 3 or 4 hours before we get there. All right, everyone, let's speed up a bit. The sooner we return, the sooner we can rest. Yes. Everyone responded, and their pace began to quicken. From the pool to Li Rong's territory was not a smooth, straight road. They had to go several times the distance, crossing mountains and taking detours along the way. Seeing that they were about to return, and with a considerable harvest, the soldiers also had more energy, and their speed along the way was not slow. Li Rong rode a horse, walking on the side of the giant lizard. After lighting a cigarette, she said, "Boss Fang Hao, I don't close my door when I sleep at night. Don't take the opportunity to do anything bad secretly when you get there. After all, there are only 2 of us in the entire building, and no one will hear me if I scream for help." After getting along for the past 2 days, coupled with the adventure in the underground palace, the two had become much more familiar. The evaluation of Fang Hao in the channel was varied. But after interacting with him, Li Rong had her own feelings. Fang Hao's strength was very powerful, and he was also quite easygoing. She basically couldn't feel any pressure from a superior on him. He could also keep up with some jokes and some dirty jokes. "Sister Li, what are you talking about? I, Fang, am an upright person." Seeing that Fang Hao didn't understand what she meant, Li Rong exhaled smoke and continued, "Don't you young people like to push the ant? Don't you want to try it?" Li Rong was tall and had a good appearance, but she was not young either. She was already considered to be in her aunt's age range. "Forget it, I can't push." Li Rong pinched the cigarette, took a deep puff, and slowly exhaled with a sneer. "You are still too young and don't understand the beauty of a mature woman. There will be a time when you regret it." Fang Hao didn't answer, just continued looking at the Lord's book. What pushed the ant or not? Mainly, there was a more mature one at home that he hadn't eaten yet. They chatted casually. The group of people walked out of the narrow area, and the road in the middle also became much wider. Traveling was boring, especially when traveling at night, dragging their tired bodies. Li Rong was very talkative, and after becoming familiar, she talked even more. Before long, she talked about her business development again. When she opens a store in Lysis City in the future, she wants Fang Hao to take care of her more. As a reward, she can be found anytime if he wants to experience pushing the ant. As the few people walked, suddenly, Luo Li in front made a gesture to silence everyone. The gesture quickly spread from front to back. Everyone immediately fell silent, holding their breath and reaching for their weapons. The surroundings were completely silent. There was no sound in the entire dense forest, and it was eerily quiet. Fang Hao also drew his weapon. Without him needing to ask, a soldier ran over from the front. He said in a low voice, "Sir, Luo Li said there is an ambush on both sides of the forest ahead. The number of people is uncertain." Hearing the soldier's words, Fang Hao also noticed something was wrong. His army had a large number of people. Although wild beasts didn't dare to approach, there should be insects and birds everywhere. Why did all the sounds stop when they got here? This situation also proved that there was danger in the mountains and forests, driving away the nearby insects and birds. "Prepare for battle." Clang, clang, clang. Everyone immediately changed formation and began to enter a state of readiness. Bang! As soon as they made a move here, a muffled sound came from the front. In front of the team, a large tree crashed down, blocking the road. Immediately after, rustling sounds came from the surrounding mountains and forests. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Since the team did not approach the ambush point, arrows from the ambush around were only shot from the forest diagonally in front. Everyone quickly took cover behind the carriages. The Lionheart Knights began to raise their rifles and counterattack. Bang, bang. For a time, the silent night became noisy. The two sides began to shoot at each other. Bows trembling and guns roaring instantly filled the entire mountain forest. In front, a few people wearing cloaks were squatting in the dark mountain forest. One of them said curiously, "What's going on with them? How did they find our ambush?" No one got close. "I don't know. They should have some special reconnaissance methods, but it doesn't matter. We brought so many people this time. There's no danger in killing them." The person who looked like a beggar looked at the position where the two sides were shooting at each other again. He said coldly, "We can't drag this on. Otherwise, it will be over if the patrol team is attracted. Let the brothers charge directly. End it as soon as possible. and then clean up the battlefield, leaving no traces. Okay. One person immediately stood up and relayed the message. Immediately after, kill. Suddenly, shouts of killing came from all around, and large numbers of mercenaries in various outfits rushed out from the dense forests on both sides. They roared as they charged towards Fang Hao and the others. Fang Hao was already considering who was ambushing him. He even distanced himself from Li Rong to avoid any problems with her. Seeing these people charge out directly, he roughly counted them, about 300 or 400 people, and his heart felt much more at ease. It was still not a problem to clear out these people. Bang, bang, bang. Bullets continued to pour out. With the physical strength of these mercenaries, they couldn't withstand the power of the bullets at all. With each round of shooting, a group of mercenaries fell to the ground. But the number of enemies was still very large. When the two sides were only 20 meters apart, Dmitry God drew his long sword and ordered coldly, "Everyone, kill the enemy. Kill." Everyone shouted in unison. They switched to melee weapons and rushed towards the attacking enemies. Li Rong's team was also among them, holding weapons and engaging in close combat with the enemy. Fang Hao stood at the back of the team. He summoned the wood spirit, restricting the enemy's movement while being vigilant about the surrounding situation, to avoid having other enemies charging out from the other side. Obviously, Fang Hao was being a bit overly cautious. Under the leadership of Dmitry Ga, they easily cut through these mercenaries like cutting vegetables. The ground was covered with corpses, and blood flowed like a river along the road. And in front, Luo Li was holding down a few people and walking over. "Sir, we caught these few people in front. They were hiding in the woods and peeking. They should be the leaders of these people." "No, we are not the leaders, not the leaders." "Shut up." Fang Hao looked at Luo Li and said, "Be vigilant around. Let Li Rong's people clean up the battlefield and bury all the bodies." "Yes." After Luo Li left, the entire team became busy again. The injured began to bandage themselves, and those in good physical condition began to strip the equipment from the corpses and then dig pits to bury them. Fang Hao's gaze returned to the captured mercenaries. There were a total of 3 people, 2 in mercenary equipment, and the other looked more like a beggar. "Tell me, who sent you? If you tell me, you might still have a chance to live." Fang Hao looked at the 5 people. All 3 lowered their heads and remained silent. Fang Hao came to the first person. "You speak." The first person turned his head to the side. Fang Hao nodded. "You have backbone." Uft. After a cold flash, the head of the first person rolled down with a gurgling sound. The faces of the other 2 changed drastically, and their eyes were full of fear. Fang Hao looked at the second person again. "You speak." The second mercenary fell into hesitation. When he saw Fang Hao's right foot step back half a step, he immediately said, "It's our commander. He gathered us here to ambush you." He withdrew the foot that had stepped back and continued to ask, "What's your commander's name?" The mercenary carefully glanced at the beggar beside him and saw that he was also lowering his head. He gritted his teeth and said, "The commander is named Sandike." "Good, you did very well." Fang Hao first praised him and continued to ask, "Why did he want to ambush us?" This I don't know. We don't even know who you are. We just came here under the commander's order," the mercenary said loudly. Fang Hao nodded and stepped back 2 steps. Uft. Gurgle. The head hit the ground with a bang and rolled to the side of the beggar. At this time, the beggar's face was covered in sweat, forming streaks on his greasy face. "So, you also don't know anything?" Fang Hao looked at the last person. Aye. The beggar stammered for a long time, but didn't say anything. Fang Hao didn't keep him either and turned around and left. The Lionheart Knight beside him immediately raised his sword and brought it down, also cutting off the beggar's head. He fumbled around on the 3 people. The Lionheart Knight caught up with Fang Hao again. "Sir, look at this." Fang Hao looked at his hand, and it was a conch the size of a palm. Sound-transmitting conch. These mercenaries were quite rich. Holding the sound-transmitting conch, Fang Hao wanted to talk to the other party and say a few words. But he quickly dismissed this idea. He already knew his name was Sandike, and he would know who he was by inquiring when the time came. There was no need to waste more time with them. He put away the conch and continued, "Bury these 3 people. The injured will take the carriage, and we will continue forward. Yes. The convoy set off again, heading towards Li Rong's city. Along the way, Li Rong's fright had also recovered a lot. She lit a cigarette and exhaled a puff. They are Sandike's people? Fang Hao glanced at her, feeling that this woman had a serious smoking habit. You've heard of him? The day before yesterday, I talked to Sandike about something, and the result wasn't very good. Li Rong said. Oh, you mean, these people came to kill you? Otherwise, you just came here. Sandike doesn't even know you. His target can only be me. This bastard is really ruthless. Li Rong gritted her teeth and cursed. Fang Hao frowned. He suspected that the Marshall family had hired these people. They didn't have a chance to target Rebecca, so they directed their target at him. However, listening to Li Rong, she also had some conflicts with this Sandike person. Moreover, a few days ago, Li Rong did indeed postpone the plan to explore the underground palace because of some negotiation. Could it really be aimed at her? Tell me about this Sandike. Li Rong smoked and said, I don't know him well. I only know that Sandike was originally a mercenary. Later, Silverwing City canceled his mercenary group status. Now he is a notorious thug in the city. I plan to open a store in another commercial street, and I still need him to nod. Does he have any background? The background is unclear, but he definitely does. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in this position. Li Rong continued to answer. Fang Hao nodded and did not continue to ask. If what Li Rong said was true, then with the conflict between her and Sandike, there should be no need to arrange an ambush for such a small matter. It was more likely that it was him. But this was just his guess and needed to be verified. They walked for a few more hours. Everyone finally arrived at Li Rong's territory. The city gate opened, and everyone in the goods entered the city gate. It was too late, so after allocating rooms, everyone went to rest. The next day, the faint morning light shone in from the window. Fang Hao tightened the blanket and opened his eyes in a daze. Li Rong's territory had no glass, and the windows were empty. He didn't feel anything when he woke up. But when he fell asleep, he felt a chill. He turned over and got out of bed, just about to walk out of the room. He heard the Lord's book, and a private chat notification came. He opened it and saw it was Zhang Bin. Boss, I'm at Scholar Nelson's place now, and I've shown him the picture. Fang Hao immediately became energetic. Okay, what did the scholar say? Can he recognize who is recorded in the picture? The scholar said it's the Golden Queen. Zhang Bin replied. Golden Queen? Wow, this name is quite wealthy, and indeed a large amount of gold objects were moved out of that underground palace at that time. Various objects, including statues, were made of gold. What? The scholar knows her. Logically speaking, when Nelson was recruited, in addition to his knowledge and memory, it did not include any other person's memory. This was also to allow heroes to better increase their loyalty. Otherwise, the recruited heroes would still remember the master they had served. It was feared that they would run away as soon as they were recruited, let alone join the territory. Zhang Bin replied. He said it's written on the pattern, and he can tell, but this is not necessarily the hero's prefix. It could be a title for a follower or subject. Fang Hao understood. It meant that this hero's prefix was not Golden Queen, but that she was obsessed with gold and was called the Golden Queen. How is that the same hobby as mine? Can you tell her strength? The scholar said it's very high and told you not to take risks. Fang Hao thought for a moment and continued. This Golden Queen should be in a deep sleep. Ask Nelson if there is a way to recruit her and have her join the territory. Soon, Zhang Bin received a reply again. He said, the scholar said you can try. If she has something she wants, there's still a possibility of her joining the territory. If she is really an undead queen, the possibility of recruiting her is not high. In other words, it's easier to recruit her when she's down and out. The other party lacks nothing and is a queen. Why would she work for you? Fang Hao continued to reply. Her condition should not be very good. I'll go pick up Nelson when the time comes and let him try. Zhang Bin, I've told Scholar Nelson. Boss, is there anything else? If not, I'll go back. It's too cold in this museum. I feel like my yang energy is not enough. All right, you go back. Okay. He hung up the chat. Fang Hao re-examined the layout and location of the entire underground palace. Although the location of the underground palace was a 2-day journey, It was still within the range of Silverwing City. Building an undead underground palace under the nose of the church was really bold, coupled with the small number of guards in the underground palace. The pyramid-shaped design of the underground palace. It made Fang Hao even more curious about this Golden Queen. Since he had already discovered it, he would never give up. He would let Nelson try when the time came. If that didn't work, he would think of other ways. After figuring everything out, Fang Hao walked out of the room. Just as he walked out of the room, he saw Li Rong in a red bathrobe. Seeing Fang Hao, her eyes were a little reproachful. I left the door open for you last night, and you really didn't come. Don't be silly. Fang Hao sat down beside her and began to eat breakfast here. After eating breakfast, Li Rong habitually lit a cigarette. She clapped her hands slightly, and immediately a militia came in from outside, carrying in treasure chests one by one. There are a total of 8 treasure chests, all silver. They are all here.